Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Hannah Payne. On the evening of May 7, 2019, a major traffic jam occurred on the road near Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, Georgia. At the same time, a truck carrying batteries caught fire on nearby I-285, causing several access points to be closed. This caused frustration and anger among many motorists. Terry Robinson, a correctional officer in Georgia who was off duty, was driving on Clark Howell Highway when he saw a red pickup truck run a red light. The truck nearly collided with a black SUV before crashing straight into a semi-truck. The semi-truck driver, Stanley Kimball, managed to escape his cab without injury, as did the SUV driver, Hannah Payne, who was unhurt and pulled over to the side of the road. Terry and 21-year-old Hannah both called 911 to report the accident. After the crash, Kenneth's pickup truck began to smoke from a fuel leak, and he initially appeared uninjured. He got out of the truck and walked around it, presumably trying to assess the damage. After waiting 20 minutes without seeing the police arrive, Terry became concerned about Kenneth's actions. Despite the significant damage to his truck, Kenneth was able to start it and drive away from the scene. Terry then asked Hannah to take a photo of Kenneth's truck's license plate. Hannah Payne, the young driver of the SUV, quickly got behind the wheel and pursued Kenneth. While driving, she called 911 again to report that the man involved in the accident might be drunk. She mentioned her intention to catch up with him to take a picture of his license plate. The police urged her to stop the chase and put her safety first, but Hannah was determined to follow him. She caught up with Kenneth and gave the police his car details. Despite this, she continued the chase, telling the police that she could not let a drunk driver cause another accident and refused to return to the scene of the original accident. Hannah then parked her SUV on the street at the intersection of Forest Peak and Road, about a mile from the accident site. After stopping the car, Hannah got out and walked toward Kenneth's pickup truck. She approached the driver's side door while recording their conversation on her phone. During their argument, her phone fell to the ground. In a moment of extreme tension, Hannah pulled out her registered handgun and shot Kenneth. She then picked up the phone and called 911 again, claiming that Kenneth pulled the trigger while she was holding the gun. She asked the police to come quickly. Police Ritchie of the Clayton County Sheriff's Department arrived on the scene and heard bystanders shouting that a woman next to an SUV had just shot a man during an argument. Hannah's black shirt was torn, and she changed into a pink hoodie while waiting for police. She quickly handed her gun to the police while they attempted to pull Kenneth out of the car and administer first aid. Hannah began talking to witnesses to their fight, hoping they would stay and tell police that Kenneth had attacked her and opened fire. Kenneth was rushed to hospital by ambulance, but sadly he could not be saved. Meanwhile, Hannah was placed in the back seat of a police car. Police then began investigating the incident on the busy rush hour road. Many witnesses saw what happened from different angles, and they provided the police with the information they needed. Hannah was quick to share her account of how the shot was fired. Hannah had been working in property management since graduating high school. Her job involved leasing properties, showing them to potential tenants, and collecting rent. In this role, she frequently met with strangers, sometimes in vacant buildings, and often handled large amounts of cash. This was her rationale for carrying a gun. In Georgia, residents can obtain a permit to carry a firearm only at the age of 21, which Hannah was at the time of the incident. Kenneth was 62 years old when he was killed. The truck he was driving belonged to his father. And inside, police discovered various tools and items he used as a mechanic. Police also found a set of needles and syringes for injecting insulin, which was crucial since witness accounts suggested he might have had diabetes or was experiencing insulin shock. The Clayton County medical examiner could not determine Kenneth's blood sugar level at the time of the accident because it naturally decreases after death. However, key witness Terry Robinson, who worked at a state medical facility, told the police that Kenneth was acting like a diabetic. Terry did not think Kenneth was drunk, but was convinced that Kenneth was diabetic and needed urgent medical attention. Kenneth's wife, Christine, later supported this diagnosis, saying she believed he had suffered an acute diabetic attack and may have been trying to drive himself to Southern Regional Medical Center when the accident occurred. She asserted that her husband would not have simply left the scene and was actually trying to get to the hospital. A few hours after the incident, Hannah spoke with police from Clayton County. She recounted the accident on Clark Hole Highway that led her to chase the suspect. Hannah explained that she had approached Kenneth to persuade him to go back to the scene of the accident, following the instructions from the 911 dispatcher. When he crossed into oncoming traffic to turn right, she saw a chance to make him stop. Hannah mentioned that she walked towards him while holding her cell phone, telling him she was currently on the line with police. At that moment, her phone fell to the ground. He then grabbed her shirt and ripped it off. Kenneth said he had something for her, which scared Hannah. In response, she pulled out a gun and threatened him. This made the situation worse, and at one point Kenneth tried to knock the gun out of her hand, leading to a struggle. Hannah reported that the gun moved, sometimes pointing the barrel at her and sometimes at Kenneth. Then, a shot was fired. Hannah told the police that she did not remember whether she had her finger on the trigger during the struggle and continued to insist that it was Kenneth who fired the shot. The gun had a double safety feature. First, the user needed to squeeze the handle to activate a switch on top of the weapon, and only then could they put their finger on the trigger to fire. Hannah mentioned that she didn't put her finger on the trigger because she was aware of how the safety worked. She believes that during the struggle, the gun may have spun, allowing anyone to release the safety catch and pull the trigger. Tiana McKinney, a witness, was driving a coworker home at the time. They saw Hannah's SUV. After noticing that the SUV had cut off Kenneth's pickup truck in the opposite lane, leading to a heated argument, she called 911. Tiana's account contradicts Hannah's story. She said that Hannah cut off Kenneth's truck, then Hannah got out of her SUV, pulled out a gun, and threatened him. Tiana wasn't the only one who noticed Hannah was the attacker. Cameron Williams captured a short video of the confrontation between Hannah and Kenneth. The video shows Hannah holding the gun, walking away from her car, and then bending down to the ground. Cameron thought that Hannah was bending down to pick up her dropped phone at that moment. Clayton County Police documented her injuries. After questioning her, they discovered scratches on the back of Hannah's neck where she said Kenneth grabbed her and pulled her forward. There was also a red, swollen area on her right wrist where Kenneth allegedly grabbed her. Hannah also mentioned a bruise on her lip, and her hand also appeared to be injured. While waiting for the police at the station, Hannah nervously bit her fingernails, claiming that they had broken during the struggle. When the police searched the car, they found several items that could support Hannah's claim that Kenneth had reached for a weapon inside. Among the clutter in the car, they found a flashlight and, most notably, a knife. However, only Hannah accused Kenneth of trying to get something to harm her, raising doubts about the reliability of her testimony. As a result, an arrest warrant was issued for Hannah Payne, which includes charges of murder, aggravated assault, and false imprisonment for Hannah stopping Kenneth's truck and pointing a gun at it. She also faces a charge of possession of a weapon during the commission of a crime, which could result in a life sentence with an additional 10 years in prison. Hannah's attorney, Matt Tucker, described Hannah as a good and responsible citizen. He argued that she pulled the gun to protect her life. Furthermore, he said that the state intentionally altered 911 recordings from the incident to remove portions of the audio that could support Hannah's testimony. Hannah was eventually granted bail and placed under house arrest, where she wore an ankle monitor and had a curfew of 9 p.m. Her release on bail upset the Kenneth family and many others who believed her actions were racially motivated. The case received widespread media coverage because it involved a white woman who shot a black man and was granted bail twice. Hannah's family later gave an interview, criticizing how the media portrayed her as someone very different from who she truly is. Hannah's parents expressed their condolences to the family of the Kenneth, while emphasizing that Hannah is a kind person who treats everyone equally, without regard for race or other differences. Hannah's trial was postponed first to 2020 and then to 2021. Even after 3 years, the trial has yet to take place. Kenneth's brother, Keith, contacted an organization that addresses issues of racism, seeking support. In his letter, he described Hannah as a cold-blooded criminal who refused to provide timely medical help to his brother, leading to his death. The accusation quickly went viral on social media. By spring 2022, Hannah remained under house arrest, and her trial date had not been established. During this time, the NAACP released a statement expressing deep concern about the slow progress of the case and urged for a quick resolution. A trial date was eventually scheduled for later that year. But the case experienced an unusual delay when defense attorney Matt Tucker did not show up in court. The judge remarked that this was not the first time she had issues with this lawyer, so she canceled the hearing and announced her intention to file a complaint against him with the Bar Association. Matt Tucker later informed the court that he was unable to attend the hearing due to having suffered a stroke and being hospitalized. In December 2023, nearly 4 years after Kenneth's murder, the much-anticipated hearing finally occurred. Clayton County Prosecutor Bonnie Smith presented evidence about the day of the shooting. Witnesses who were present at the scene also shared their accounts of that day. Since the incident unfolded rapidly, their testimonies varied and sometimes conflicted. One witness claimed that Hannah drew a gun as soon as she exited her car, while others asserted she only did so after she and Kenneth had already begun arguing. Despite these inconsistencies, the witnesses agreed on key details. Describing Hannah's approach to Kenneth's car as aggressive and noting that they witnessed her striking Kenneth. Hannah's claim of self-defense would not have been valid if the jury determined that she was the attacker and did not attempt to defuse the situation. Medical experts concluded that Kenneth died from a single gunshot wound to the abdomen, with no other injuries to the body. During the trial, Hannah defended herself by explaining that she believed she was following proper procedure when Terry Robinson, the main witness to the first incident, asked her to take a photo of Kenneth's license plate. Terry stated that he did not instruct Hannah to follow Kenneth. However, Hannah reported that she observed Terry waving his hand at her multiple times, as if signaling her to follow Kenneth's car and photograph his license plates. Witnesses described Hannah's driving as aggressive, noting that she nearly collided with another vehicle during the pursuit and created a dangerous situation by stopping in front of a red pickup truck. After the incident, Hannah shared with the jury a story similar to what she told the police. She said that when she approached Kenneth to ask him to return to the scene of the original accident, he grabbed her and refused to let go. She emphasized that the moment Kenneth hit the gas and crashed into her car, she felt extremely scared. The prosecution asked why Hannah ignored 4 police instructions to stop chasing Kenneth and return to the scene of the original accident. Hannah replied that she could not remember that moment because it had happened 4 years ago. The prosecution reiterated that the Kenneth did not know Hannah and was not obliged to follow her directives. After reviewing all the evidence, the jury took about 2 hours to deliberate and subsequently found Hannah Payne guilty of all charges, including premeditated murder. Hannah was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 43 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alex Murdaugh. Richard Alexander Alex Murdaugh was born on May 27, 1968. His family, the Murdaughs, are a respected and well-connected family of lawyers who have dominated South Carolina's low-country legal system for over 100 years. 3 generations of Murdaughs served as district attorneys of the 14th Judicial Circuit from 1920 to 2006, but Alex's actions brought an end to their reign. The foundation of the family's later success was laid by Alex's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh Sr., who founded the law firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eloth and Dietrich, PMPD. Over the decades, the Murdaughs' influence grew so substantial that the Hamptons became known as Murdaugh County. Alex pursued a law degree from the University of North Carolina, following in his family's footsteps. There, he met his future wife, Margaret Maggie Burrell, and they started dating in 1991. They got married 2 years later, on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex and Maggie had 2 sons, Richard Buster Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh. Alex became a personal injury attorney with his family's firm PMPD, aiming to continue his family's legacy. However, unlike his predecessors, Alex misused the power and influence his family's firm provided, using it to conceal financial crimes, theft, and possibly even murder. For over a decade, his wrongdoing went unnoticed until his youngest son Paul was involved in a boating accident that resulted in a girl's death. Paul Murdaugh's boating accident, the latest in a series of suspicious deaths surrounding the Murdaugh family, has sparked speculation that these accidents might be part of a larger cover-up. The theory seems plausible, given the family's history and resources, especially considering how they handled Mallory Beach's death. On February 23, 2019, Paul Murdaugh drove the family boat to a party on Puka's Island. The 19-year-old, fresh out of high school, was accompanied by his girlfriend Morgan Dowie, Anthony Cook, Mallory Beach, and Miley Allman. They were looking forward to an unsupervised night of fun, starting with a house party and an oyster roast on the island. To ensure a fun night, Paul used his older brother's identity card to buy beer and hard liquor. The group departed from the Murdaugh River House around 7 p.m. By midnight, they were ready for more fun, so Paul suggested driving the boat to downtown Beaufort, where he and Connor had a few more drinks. At around 1 a.m., they headed back to the boat. As they walked back, a surveillance camera caught a tender moment between Anthony and Mallory. By this time, Paul had drunk a lot of alcohol, and according to the other passengers, he began acting strangely around 1:15 a.m. Once they were back on the water, the situation rapidly deteriorated. Paul's behavior became erratic, and the group started arguing with him. He was driving the boat in circles, clearly drunk. Anthony wanted to get off on a nearby rock, but Paul refused to let him. Morgan said Paul left the steering wheel multiple times to argue with her and Mallory, who was terrified. According to the GPS data from the onboard Garmin device, the boat's speed increased at some point. Paul was behind the wheel when the boat crashed into the Arur Creek Bridge at 2:20 a.m., despite his denial that he had been speeding. As a result, Mallory was thrown into the water. The others were also hurt, with Connor suffering a broken jaw and Morgan's hand being badly injured. Connor managed to call 911, and help arrived quickly. When the Beaufort County Deputy Sheriff arrived, he found the teenagers in a state of distress. Anthony was particularly agitated, having tried to rush towards Paul after witnessing the scene. The police investigation revealed blood in the main compartment of the boat and a large gash in the hull from the impact. It was clear that all the teens were heavily intoxicated. While Anthony was not taken to the hospital, the others were transported for medical treatment. Paul was the most agitated of the group, with a blood alcohol level of 0.243, significantly exceeding the legal limit. That night, Alex Murdaugh, Paul's father, was visible as he moved from one hospital room to another, attempting to calm them down and mitigate the situation. Following an 8-day search, the search party finally discovered Mallory's body. and the coroner's report stated that her cause of death was a combination of blunt force trauma to the head and drowning. Despite multiple eyewitness accounts, including Paul's girlfriend Morgan, who claimed Paul was out of control at the steering wheel on the night of the incident, he was neither arrested nor charged. This led to speculation that Alex Murdaugh had somehow manipulated the justice system to spare his son. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family faced a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Mallory's family. The lawsuit alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, was aware her son was drunk when they went boating and had provided the necessary identification to purchase alcohol. It wasn't until April 18, 2019, which coincided with Mallory's 20th birthday, that Paul was charged with 3 felonies: boating under the influence, causing Mallory's death, and seriously injuring 2 other passengers. Paul pleaded not guilty and was released on a $50,000 bond. Unfortunately, Paul did not live to face trial, as he passed away before the proceedings. This incident added to the tally of seemingly accidental deaths linked to the Murdaugh family. Additionally, the murder of openly gay teenager Stephen Smith has also been associated with the Murdaughs. Stephen was discovered dead on July 8, 2015, in the middle of a road in Hampton County, South Carolina, with blunt force trauma to the head. The initial ruling was a hit-and-run incident with no suspect arrested. However, Stephen's mother believed he was the victim of a hate crime, as he had been a classmate of Alex Murdaugh's oldest son, Buster, in high school, and there were rumors of a romantic relationship between them. Some people believed that Buster might have been involved in Stephen's death, and that the claim he was killed in a hit-and-run was fabricated to conceal the truth. However, it wasn't until March 22, 2023, that the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division reopened the case, declaring Stephen's death a murder, although no suspects have been identified. The Murdaugh family has also been linked to another tragic event: the death of Gloria Satterfield, their longtime housekeeper. On February 2, 2018, Gloria suffered a severe head injury after falling down the stairs at the family's Moselle residence. She died on February 26, 2018, due to complications arising from her injury. Alex Murdaugh claimed that his dogs ran to greet Gloria at the top of the stairs, causing her to trip and fall backward, hitting her head. However, no autopsy was performed to verify his account, and her death certificate lists the cause of death as natural causes. Gloria Satterfield's sons sued Alex Murdaugh for wrongful death, winning a $4.3 million settlement in 2020. However, they didn't get the money. Instead, Murdaugh and his friend, lawyer Corey Fleming, stole the payout, diverting it to Murdaugh's account without the sons' knowledge. Satterfield's sons sued Alex Murdaugh on Sept 15, 2021, same day state investigators started criminal probe into Gloria Satterfield's death, sparked by coroner's finding of unnatural causes, leading to exhumation for further investigation. By Sept 2021, Alex Murdaugh faced financial and embezzlement charges after nearly a decade of fraud schemes, including a money laundering and painkiller ring with his cousin Curtis Smith. On September 4, 2021, Alex Murdaugh concocted a sinister plan. He gave a gun to Curtis and instructed him to shoot him. The goal was for Alex's son, Buster, to collect a life insurance payout of $10 million upon Alex's death. Curtis followed the plan, pulling over where Alex had staged a fake flat tire and shooting him. However, the bullet only caused minor injuries, and Alex was able to call 911 himself. When law enforcement arrived, they suspected foul play but couldn't prove it. Days later, Alex confessed to conspiring with Curtis to stage the shooting. His lawyers claimed that he was struggling and that unsavory characters were taking advantage of his vulnerable state of mind. Alex surrendered to authorities when he learned a warrant had been issued for his arrest. He was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. 2 days after the incident, Alex announced his resignation from his family's law firm, citing his intention to enter rehab for treatment. After leaving the hospital, he expressed regret over his recent decisions, saying that he had made many decisions that he truly regretted. Just hours later, another bombshell dropped when his firm released an official statement accusing Murdaugh of embezzling $792,000 in company funds. The firm's CFO had earlier confronted him about the missing money and subsequently reported him to the authorities. As a result, the South Carolina Supreme Court indefinitely suspended Alex's law license in September 2021. As investigators continued to scrutinize Alex Murdaugh's life, they uncovered a web of financial crimes, including tax evasion, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds from clients and his law firm. After leaving rehab on October 14, 2021, Alex was arrested again and charged with 2 felony counts of obtaining property by false pretenses. The arrest stemmed from an investigation into his alleged misappropriation of a wrongful death settlement payout related to Gloria Satterfield's case. This time, the court denied him bond. Alex Murdaugh's legal troubles were just getting started. On November 18, 2021, he was indicted on 27 counts of financial misconduct, accused of stealing from his clients, fellow lawyers, and the family of his late housekeeper. Just 3 weeks later, on December 9, 2021, additional charges were filed against him, bringing the total to 48. At the time, the charges included forgery, money laundering, computer crimes, and breach of trust with fraudulent intent. It was estimated that Alex had stolen over $6.2 million from his victims. The state's investigation into Murdaugh's business dealings took months to unravel, with new charges being brought against him almost daily. By June 2022, the number of charges against him had grown to 81. When Alex was formally disbarred on July 13, 2022, he faced a total of 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. Among those who filed lawsuits against the estates of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh was the mother of 19-year-old Mallory Beach. The enormity of these financial crimes led to questions about the character of the once prominent attorney. Was he hiding something even more sinister, such as the murder of his wife and son? If so, what would his motive have been? South Carolina Law Enforcement Division re-examined the double murder case with new info from Alex Murdaugh's financial crimes investigation. They found Alex and Maggie's marriage was troubled, with Maggie living separately at the beach home, an hour from the Moselle property. Marion Proctor stated Maggie Murdaugh was hesitant to meet her husband at their lodge, thinking it suspicious. Despite her reservations, she agreed to visit before seeing his dying father, but was killed beforehand. Maggie and son Paul were found shot dead at their 1,700-acre estate. They were discovered near the dog kennels with multiple gunshot wounds. Paul was shot twice with a shotgun, while Maggie had 5 wounds from an AR-style rifle firing .300 blackout ammo. Alex Murdaugh stated that he had taken a lengthy nap that day before going to visit his ailing mother who was suffering from dementia. He claimed to have been away for approximately 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and upon his return, he discovered his wife and younger son deceased on the floor near the dog kennels. Alex Murdaugh, a lawyer, killed his family to divert attention from his financial wrongdoings. He faced a subpoena and a hearing on June 10, 2021, and his law firm had discovered his misuse of company funds. Fearing exposure, he allegedly murdered his family. Alex Murdaugh was charged with killing his wife and son 13 months after they were fatally shot. The prosecutor claimed Murdaugh used a shotgun and rifle, but the guns were never found. The defense argued 2 shooters were involved due to different weapons used, and expert testimony suggested the killers were 5'2" to 5'4" inch tall, excluding Murdaugh, who was 6'4". Prosecutors argued that other factors affected the bullet path and that Murdaugh was a suspect from the start. They showed 2 videos of him in different clothes, implying he tried to sway a key witness. Cell phone data shows Murdaugh was at his mom's for 15 to 20 minutes, not 45. A video on Paul's phone at 8:44 p.m. puts Murdaugh at the crime scene, debunking his alibi. Murdaugh admitted lying about his alibi, blaming opioid addiction and paranoia. Prosecutors think he used his wife's phone to create a fake alibi, and cell data shows a suspicious rise in his steps, suggesting evidence tampering. Video from dog kennels was key evidence, leading to Murdaugh's guilty verdict and 2 life sentences. Murdaugh's lawyers seek new trial alleging jury tampering. He faces appeal, criminal charges, and lawsuits. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. The Richardson family consisted of Kim and Scott Richardson, who were devoted parents actively involved in their children's lives. Their son Jackson was passionate about football, while their daughter Brooke Skylar, or simply Skylar, was a cheerleader. Skylar struggled with an eating disorder, which had taken over her life from a very young age. Her mother, Kim, first became aware of Skylar's eating habits issues when she was in the 6th grade at just 12 years old. Skylar's fixation on food and exercise became increasingly apparent, such as when she refused to buy gum if it had more than 5 calories. As a flyer on the cheerleading squad, Skylar felt pressured to maintain a certain weight, which made her struggle even harder. Her obsession with her body image and the constant fear of gaining weight had consumed her. Skylar's battle with weight and body image started when she was a cheerleader. To stay at a certain weight, she began throwing up after eating. However, this harmful habit made her problems worse. After the cheerleading season ended, Skylar's struggle with her weight got even harder. She would have times where she ate too much food in a short time, known as binge eating, and then times where she would hardly eat or follow very strict diets. Skylar's parents saw the change in her behavior and were worried about her health. They tried to talk to her about it, but Skylar would shut them down whenever they brought it up. She didn't want to discuss it, and any attempt to talk about her weight was met with resistance. Frustrated, Skylar's parents looked for professional help from doctors and therapists, hoping they could help their daughter. After an evaluation, Skylar was diagnosed with body dysmorphia, a condition characterized by an obsessive focus on a perceived flaw in appearance, often leading to significant distress and impairment in daily functioning. In the summer of 2016, just before her senior year, Skylar started dating her friend's cousin. However, the relationship was short-lived, and by January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, a high school student. At this time, Skylar seemed genuinely happy and was gaining weight. Her parents, Kim and Scott, were hopeful that her eating disorder was under control as they noticed her healthy appearance and genuine happiness. In February, Skylar chose her prom dress, a tight-fitting one that required her to be laced into it. A month later, in mid-March, Skylar went on a family vacation, during which she wore a 2-piece swimsuit. Her mom, Kim, thought she looked great. Kim, aware that Skylar and Brandon were getting close, wanted Skylar to start taking birth control pills, believing this would protect her daughter's health and prevent unwanted pregnancies. In mid-April 2017, Skylar visited her mother's gynecologist to get a birth control prescription. Kim waited outside the doctor's office while Skylar met with the doctor. After leaving the examination room, Skylar emerged in tears. Kim immediately asked her daughter why she was so upset, and Skylar replied that it was a traumatic experience. Unbeknownst to Kim, the real reason behind Skylar's tears was that the doctor had informed her that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Skylar asked the doctor to keep the news secret, as she wasn't ready to share it with her loved ones. 9 days after the incident, Skylar, who was heavily pregnant at the time, attended her prom with her boyfriend Brandon on May 5th. Despite her advanced pregnancy, Skylar was able to fit into her prom gown. 2 months later, on July 14, 2017, the police arrived at the Richardson home. They informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak with Skylar about something she may have witnessed. The police reassured the parents that Skylar was not in any trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, unsure of what would happen when they got there. The police wanted to ask Skylar some questions about a call they had received from a doctor who specializes in women's health. This doctor's office had reported that one of their patients, a young woman, had given birth to a baby and then buried the baby in her backyard. When they arrived at the police station, the police took Skylar into custody and put her in a room where they would ask her questions. Skylar's father was not allowed to be in the room with her before the interview started. The police then read Skylar her rights and told her about the call they had received from the doctor's office. According to the caller, on April 26th, Skylar had gone to the doctor's office and found out she was pregnant. But when she went back to the office, she told the doctor that the baby was not alive and that she had buried it in her backyard. During her police interview, Skylar confessed to giving birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7, 2017. She revealed that she had delivered the baby in her bathroom, where she discovered the infant wasn't breathing and had no heartbeat. Skylar felt compelled to bury the baby and opted to keep the incident a secret. Without making a sound, Skylar went downstairs, fetched a small garden shovel, and dug a shallow grave in her backyard. She buried the baby, marking the spot and preserving the memory of her child. Skylar placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. After questioning Skylar, the police informed her parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason she was brought to the station. Kim and Scott were stunned to learn their daughter had been pregnant, as they were completely unaware. Kim was devastated upon hearing the news, saddened that her daughter had endured this ordeal alone. Skylar told her parents she had named the baby Annabelle and said the father was a cousin of a close friend, someone she had briefly dated. Then, crime scene investigators arrived at the Richardson home to search for the baby's remains. The investigators carefully searched the area, removing weeds and brushing the ground to uncover any hidden evidence. Despite the overgrown vegetation, they thoroughly examined every inch of the area. After clearing the weeds and brushing the ground, the police found several bones, including parts of the skull. They carefully collected these remains, placing them in small body bags to preserve any evidence they might hold. The investigators took great care to handle the bones gently, ensuring they remained intact. One investigator recalled that the remains had a strong odor, while another investigator acknowledged that the bones were extremely small, making it challenging to distinguish them from rocks. The coroner confirmed the discovery of hair and tiny fingernails, but no organs or other recognizable features. After being questioned for over 5 hours, Skylar and her parents were permitted to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Skylar, requesting her presence once again. They reassured her father, Scott, that she was not in trouble. During the subsequent interview with Skylar, the police revealed that they had received new information from the coroner's office that contradicted her initial account. The medical examiner who analyzed the remains claimed to have found evidence suggesting that the baby's bones may have been subjected to fire. Skylar was taken aback when the police told her that her baby had been burned. She strongly denied starting a fire, insisting that she would never harm her child. However, the police were convinced that Skylar was guilty of killing her baby girl and trying to destroy the evidence by burning her remains. They suggested that Skylar might have tried to cremate the baby's body to get rid of it, but this idea only confused Skylar further. She remained adamant that she hadn't burned the baby. But then Skylar changed her story. She told the police that she did have a lighter and might have used it to try to cremate her baby's remains. She also revealed that the baby might have been born alive, as it had made a sound, possibly even cried, on one occasion. Skylar admitted to holding the newborn too tightly, which might have contributed to its death. During a 1-hour interrogation, the police collected enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed that Skylar had suffocated the baby. After presenting their case to a grand jury, Skylar was eventually indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, a charge that carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skylar pleaded not guilty to the additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and putting children in danger. She spent the weekend in jail until her family could secure a $50,000 bond. Following the tragic death of her child, Skylar found herself at the center of a fierce media storm. From the moment her name was made public, the public judged and scrutinized everything she and her family did. The constant judgment and scrutiny had a severe impact on their well-being, leading them to retreat to the safety of their own home. However, even there, they received threats that made it difficult for them to venture outside, and the public would take pictures of them, further fueling the frenzy and adding to the immense pressure they faced. The public scrutiny became overwhelming, affecting every part of their lives. Although Skylar's defense attorneys thought she had given a false confession and the baby's death was an accident, the prosecution refused to change their approach. Despite new evidence that didn't support their first conclusion, they continued with their case. A key piece of evidence was the medical examiner's initial report, which said the remains were burned. However, after re-examining the evidence, the medical examiner withdrew this statement, saying there was no proof of burning. Even with this new information, the prosecution didn't change their approach. They focused on Skylar's admission that she had tried to cremate the remains, even though the evidence didn't support their theory of a burned body. This showed the state's determination to get a conviction, regardless of the evidence. Skylar's family endured immense stress and fear from public scrutiny and threats, making daily life unbearable. Her defense team worked tirelessly to prepare her case. Though they raised $50,000 for bail, Skylar's release came with an ankle monitor, keeping her mostly homebound and isolated. Over a period of 12 months, Skylar's life underwent a drastic change. She had to put her plans to attend the University of Cincinnati on hold while she waited for her trial, having been accused of murdering her baby. The charges against her were severe, and her defense team filed a motion to have the trial transferred to a different county. However, the request was denied, which meant Skylar had to face the trial in the original jurisdiction. Skylar felt overwhelmed by her situation, struggling to cope with the emotional toll of the allegations and feeling isolated. Her dogs became her main comfort, providing companionship as she awaited trial. Despite the challenges, her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and supporting her fight for freedom. In July 2019, the state made an unexpected offer to Skylar's defense attorney. The offer was that if Skylar pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, which had a 15-year sentence, the state would drop the charge of aggravated murder. Skylar's parents were torn about this decision and wondered if she should take the deal. After thinking it over carefully, Skylar decided to reject the plea deal. This decision scared her parents, who questioned whether she had made the right choice, but they knew it was her decision to make, not theirs. On September 3, 2019, Skylar stood trial for the murder of her newborn daughter. In their opening statements, the prosecution presented a text message Skylar had sent to her mother, in which she expressed happiness and mentioned that her belly had already returned to its normal size, just a few hours after giving birth. The prosecution argued that this message, along with others she sent to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, suggested that Skylar was relieved about the baby's death, and pointed to these texts as evidence that she was involved in the baby's death. The prosecution also alleged that Skylar had searched online for how to get rid of a baby, and that her mother, Kim, had warned her that her life would be over if she became pregnant, which had apparently frightened Skylar. According to the prosecutor, Skylar was determined to keep her pregnancy a secret, and when she could no longer conceal her daughter, she took her daughter's life. During the trial, the doctor who performed the autopsy on Skylar's baby testified, She concluded that the baby died from a violent homicide, but couldn't determine if the skull fractures occurred before or after death. Instead, she based her opinion on Skylar's statements during the police interrogation. Skylar's defense attorney questioned the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been influenced by confirmation bias. The attorney argued that the doctor had already formed an opinion and wasn't likely to change it during cross-examination. The doctor acknowledged that she didn't examine the baby's remains under a dissecting microscope. The attorney asked if she had consulted an obstetrician, and she replied that she hadn't. The attorney also asked if she had looked at photos of the burial site or Skylar's backyard, and again, the doctor said she hadn't. A fetal medicine specialist, another doctor, testified in the afternoon session of Skylar's trial, primarily under questioning by the prosecution. The doctor questioned the claim that Skylar's baby was stillborn, pointing out that there was only one screening and that measurements of fundal height during the third trimester of pregnancy have a 60% margin of error. The doctor also noted that Skylar had reported feeling her baby move, which is not possible for a deceased baby. Furthermore, the doctor expressed skepticism about a report filed by a doctor for the defense, which suggested that Skylar's baby likely had growth issues. During cross-examination by Skylar's attorney, the doctor was asked if he was being paid by the prosecution. He explained that he received $5,000 per day, which is the cost to his practice when a doctor is absent. In the courtroom, the prosecution presented their case against Skylar, revealing shocking and heart-wrenching evidence. The most impactful pieces of evidence were the pictures of the deceased baby's remains displayed on the television screen. Skylar's reactions during the trial, when the pictures of her baby's remains appeared on the screen, showed the lasting impact these images had on her. Initially, Skylar stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with the photos, seemingly unable to bear the sight. This stoic demeanor was in contrast to her behavior the previous day, when she visibly trembled as the judge sat down before jury selection. Skylar's defense team presented their case, arguing that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed that the prosecution's evidence consisted of half-truths and that some texts presented in court were taken out of context. The defense team argued that Skylar's frequent use of informal texting language did not necessarily mean she committed the crime of murdering her daughter. They highlighted Skylar's mental health struggles, specifically her long-standing battle with an eating disorder that began when she was 12. The team presented evidence that Skylar regularly saw a psychologist and nutritionist to manage her condition, and showed the jury photos of Skylar at different weights and appearances, including when she was extremely thin and when she appeared slightly heavier. Skylar's defense attorneys highlighted that despite her physical condition, she had cradled the baby for hours while bleeding on the bathroom floor, demonstrating her strong commitment to comforting and caring for the lifeless body after enduring extreme pain. The attorneys told the court that Skylar had planned to inform her family about her pregnancy, but unfortunately, she never got the chance, according to her doctor. Skylar was told she would give birth within 8 to 10 weeks, so she assumed she would have enough time to attend the prom and graduate from high school before discussing the situation with her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. During the defense, an obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn. He argued that since Scott didn't admit to cutting the umbilical cord, it's possible it detached before or during birth. The doctor also pointed out that Skylar's description of the baby's pale appearance was notable, as newborns are usually a purplish color, indicating they're healthy. Additionally, the obstetrician stated that Skylar's weight gain of only 15 pounds throughout her pregnancy was minimal, and suggested that her eating disorder may have restricted the baby's development in the womb. This testimony aimed to raise questions about the accuracy of Skylar's statements to the police regarding the baby's well-being. The defense argued that Skylar had been selective in what she told the police during her interrogation, omitting any harmful behavior towards the baby, and that her testimony lacked credibility. They suggested that other factors might have contributed to the baby's death. After a one-week trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before delivering a verdict. Skylar was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. However, she was found guilty of abuse of a corpse, a felony carrying a maximum 1-year prison sentence. The judge ordered her to remain in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the following day. At the sentencing hearing, Skylar apologized for her actions and acknowledged the seriousness of her mistakes. The judge was unsympathetic, rebuking Skylar for her role in the tragic loss of her baby. He emphasized that better decisions during her pregnancy would have saved her child's life. The judge's words were stern and unyielding, making it clear that Skylar's choices had devastating consequences. After expressing his dissatisfaction with Skylar's behavior, the judge sentenced her to 3 years of probation for abusing a corpse. This sentence served as a reminder that her actions were both morally wrong and illegal. In November 2020, Skylar's lawyers asked the judge to end her probation 2 years early, and the request was granted. During the hearing, Skylar said she wanted to return to a normal life and didn't need a probation officer to supervise her anymore. The judge acknowledged her progress and agreed that the probation department no longer needed to devote resources to her case. The judge emphasized that probation is not just about punishing or rehabilitating someone, but also giving them a chance to show why they shouldn't be sent to prison. Since being found not guilty, Skylar has made the most of her second chance. She has finished 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that defended her. Although she was cleared of all charges, Skylar has encountered difficulties in finding more employment due to her being on probation. However, she remains resolute in pursuing her career ambitions and has shown an interest in going to law school to become a public defender. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sierra Jugan. Sierra Jugan was a young woman who captivated everyone with her joyful personality. Her happy and humorous nature made her the center of attention wherever she went. She had a lively, cheeky personality that brought immense happiness to those around her. Even when she made mistakes, she had a special way of making her mom smile. As Sierra entered high school, she continued to showcase her adventurous spirit. She boldly took on new experiences, including playing volleyball. Whether on or off the court, she displayed a remarkable level of comfort and confidence. On July 19, 2016, the Jen family returned from their vacation and began unpacking. Sierra was looking forward to the fall semester at the University of Tu, where she planned to study abroad. Her mom wanted to discuss her plans with her, but Sierra, being an athletic person, was eager to try out her new bike. So whenever she had the time, she was keen to take a ride. Before leaving the house, Sierra told her mom that she was heading to her boyfriend Josh's house. Her mom acknowledged her plans and told her she would see her later, around 1:05 p.m. Sierra looked cute, with her hair tied up in a ponytail, wearing shorts and a tank top as she set out on her ride. Josh, Sierra's boyfriend, called her home phone because he was worried about her whereabouts. He had tried calling her phone several times, but it kept going straight to voicemail. When Josh asked Sierra's mom if she was home, she said no. Josh told Sierra's mom that Sierra had left his house around 7 p.m., and he hadn't seen or heard from her since then. Sierra's mom knew something was wrong because Sierra always answered her phone. Her first thought was to call Sierra's grandparents who lived nearby, but they said Sierra wasn't with them. Sierra's family and Josh started searching for her, worried about her safety. Sierra's mom quickly got in her car and started driving around, looking carefully at every possible place Sierra could be, including the sides of the road. Sierra's aunt, uncle, and cousin also joined the search, thinking Sierra might have been in an accident and got hit by a car. As time went by, worry grew. The possibility of Sierra being hurt, maybe with a broken leg, weighed heavily on their minds. Despite their relentless efforts and exhaustive search, they couldn't find any trace of Sierra. When Sierra's mom got home, she immediately took to social media, reaching out to Sierra's friends, desperately hoping someone had seen or heard from her. But to her dismay, there was complete silence. Hours passed, and still, there was no sign of Sierra. Filled with worry, Sierra's mom knew every minute counted and decided to call the police. Just an hour later, a concerned neighbor called Sierra's family saying County Road 6 was blocked off. With their hearts racing, Sierra's family rushed out to see what was happening. They were met by a chaotic scene surrounded by officers who refused to let them through. The officers stayed tight-lipped about Sierra, leaving her mom in a state of panic. She couldn't help but wonder if the police had found her missing daughter. The small-town police officers, seeking answers, decided to seek the FBI's assistance. They promised to deliver any information they could to Sierra's family as soon as possible. Understandably, the family found themselves unable to sleep, remaining wide awake and contemplating their next course of action. The following day, Sierra's mom and aunt took matters into their own hands, refusing to wait for answers. Her mom made a series of calls to hospitals, desperately searching for any signs of an unidentified female patient that might be Sierra. Despite call after call, they turned up nothing, leaving them feeling increasingly hopeless. A lead emerged from Detroit, Michigan, offering a glimmer of hope in the search for Sierra. A young woman, bearing a striking resemblance to her, had been admitted to a hospital with severe injuries, including numerous broken bones, after escaping from a moving vehicle with no identification. In an effort to confirm her identity, a nurse asked Sierra's family to describe any distinguishing marks on her body. Sierra's mom recalled a scar on her calf and a pierced belly button, which seemed to match the hospitalized girl's features, raising the family's hopes that they had finally found Sierra. Unfortunately, their hopes were soon dashed when they discovered that the girl in the hospital was not Sierra, leaving the family devastated and heartbroken after investing so much hope and anticipation in the possibility. Later that morning, the police visited Sierra's house to brief them on the previous night's events. One of the officers had found a trampled cornfield near where he'd parked his car and approached the area. He noticed signs of a struggle and a motorcycle track inside the cornfield. Not wanting to disturb any potential evidence, he backed away without touching anything. As he retreated, he caught a glimpse of a reflection: Sierra's purple bike. Further investigation uncovered several items at the scene: a pair of men's sunglasses, a pair of women's sunglasses, a blood-stained sock, and a screwdriver. Based on these discoveries, the police concluded that Sierra was likely abducted from that location. During the investigation, detectives thoroughly questioned Sierra's friends and family to gather information about her boyfriend Josh. They learned that Sierra and Josh had been inseparable since they were 7 years old, and their friendship developed into a romantic relationship in their first year of high school. The couple was known for their energetic and carefree nature, sharing a passion for skiing, among other things. After high school, Sierra went to the University of Toledo, while Josh enrolled at Bowling Green. But despite the physical distance, their commitment to each other remained strong. They often talked about getting married in the future, although Sierra emphasized her priority on completing her education before settling down, showcasing her academic dedication. Detectives investigating the case found that Sierra had visited Josh's house in the early afternoon on July 19th. According to the gathered information, Sierra decided to leave Josh's house and head home around 6:30 p.m. Because he was worried about her safety, Josh joined Sierra on her ride home, riding alongside her on his motorcycle. After a few miles, Sierra told Josh to turn back and go home, wanting to ride her bike alone and prove her independence. Josh reluctantly agreed, and they parted ways, with Josh heading back on his motorcycle and Sierra continuing her ride. During the investigation, detectives discovered motorcycle tracks in the nearby corn stalks, not far from Sierra's bike. This raised the question of whether these tracks belonged to Josh's motorcycle, and detectives couldn't ignore the possible connection. They began a thorough investigation to determine if there was any evidence linking Josh to the scene where Sierra went missing. As a result, detectives set up a command post to gather all relevant clues about Sierra's disappearance. A promising lead emerged quickly. A local resident came forward, saying that on July 14th, while driving, he saw a motorcycle helmet on the side of the road. He asked his son to retrieve it and put it in their truck. Later, after learning about Sierra's disappearance, he examined the helmet more closely and found red stains, which he suspected were blood. The helmet was discovered near the cornfield where Sierra's bike was found. The detectives asked Josh about his helmet, and to their relief, he produced it, confirming he had it with him. Furthermore, they verified that Josh had returned home after the interview with his parents, ruling him out as a suspect due to his solid alibi. Despite being visibly shaken, Josh was not suspected by Sierra's family in connection with her disappearance. The detectives focused on identifying the owner of a blood-stained motorcycle helmet found on the roadside. Recognizing the significance of DNA evidence, they sent the helmet to the crime lab for testing, awaiting the results with anticipation, hoping for a breakthrough in their investigation. Community unites in search for Sierra, organizing parties to scour every area for clues. Townspeople work together, fueled by a deep sense of unity, to bring her home safely. Hundreds gather at a candlelight vigil, sending thoughts and prayers for her return. 2 days after Sierra vanished, the police got a tip about a suspicious van speeding through the area where she was last seen. People thought she might have been kidnapped and forced into sex trafficking. The tipster gave the police the van's license plate number. The police interviewed the van's owner, but it turned out the van had nothing to do with Sierra's disappearance. The owner explained that he sped up because another car suddenly appeared from behind, which might have been a family member looking for Sierra, and he panicked. By the 48-hour mark, the investigation had turned up no leads on Sierra's whereabouts. As time goes on, her family is struggling to stay hopeful. With each passing day, the chances of finding her alive get smaller and smaller. Despite trying to stay positive, the harsh reality of the situation is getting harder to ignore. The police went from door to door searching for Sierra, and their investigation eventually took them to a farm near where her bike was found. The farm, which covered an acre of land, had several buildings including a small house, a trailer, and a large barn. The owner of the property was James Worley. When the police arrived at the farm, they started talking to James Worley. They asked him about the day Sierra went missing, hoping he could tell them something about her disappearance. But what James said shocked them. He told them he had been out riding his motorcycle that day, but it broke down, and he lost some things along the way, including a screwdriver and his helmet. This was surprising because those were the same items found at the scene where Sierra was taken. By saying this, James had unintentionally put himself at the scene of the crime, which made the detectives very suspicious of him and his connection to Sierra's disappearance. The police were determined to delve deeper into their investigation, and they questioned James Worley. During the questioning, they noticed something that caught their attention: scratches on his face. It was clear that he had been involved in a struggle, and this discovery only increased their suspicions about him, raising more questions. The detectives wondered if these scratches were the result of a confrontation with the missing girl, Sierra. After questioning James Worley about Sierra's disappearance, the detectives returned to the police station. They decided to conduct a background check on him, hoping to uncover relevant information as they looked into his past. But what they discovered sent chills down their spines. James Worley had a dark criminal history, including a previous attempt to abduct a young woman 26 years earlier on July 4, 1989. The woman's name was Robin Garter. On July 4, 1989, 26-year-old Robin Garter was getting ready to attend a neighborhood picnic. While her mother was busy preparing potato salad and making final arrangements for the event, Robin decided to squeeze in a bike ride beforehand. However, she had forgotten to bring water and was now struggling with the intense heat. As she considered turning back home to quench her thirst, Robin heard the sound of a car approaching from behind. Robin thought that after the vehicle passed her, she would head back home. But before she could react, the car crashed into her bike, sending her flying into a nearby ditch. She was stunned and disoriented. The driver stopped and got out, looking concerned and trying to figure out what had happened. But then things took a dark turn. The person who had hit her suddenly revealed sinister intentions. Without warning, he hit her hard on the back of the head. As she struggled to understand what was happening, the attacker held a screwdriver to her throat, threatening to kill her in a menacing tone. He ordered her to get up and get into his car right away. The man forced Robin into his car at screwdriver point, trying to handcuff her once she was inside. He managed to cuff one wrist, but Robin fought back fiercely, preventing him from cuffing the other. She screamed for help at the top of her lungs, but her cries were drowned out by the empty cornfields, with no one around to hear her. Robin's fierce resistance against her attacker left her on the brink of unconsciousness multiple times, but she refused to give up. Just as the silence was becoming unsettling, she picked up the faint sound of a motorcycle in the distance. As she strained her eyes, she saw it approaching the car where her captor was. Realizing this might be her only chance to escape, Robin waved her arms wildly to get the rider's attention. Luckily, the rider noticed her distress signals and brought the motorcycle to a stop. In a desperate bid for help, Robin explained that the man was trying to kill her. Without hesitation, she seized the opportunity and quickly climbed onto the back of the motorcycle, leaving her captor and the car behind. The motorcycle rider drove Robin home, where she collapsed. Robin's mother called the police and an ambulance, and Robin was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. The motorcyclist, determined to help the authorities, led the police back to the scene of the incident. To their surprise, they found James Worley still present, waiting with his car. When questioned, James was fully cooperative and provided identification to prove who he was. However, his version of events differed significantly from initial assumptions. James strongly denied any intention of kidnapping Robin. According to his account, Robin was riding her bike erratically, swerving into the road, making it impossible for him to avoid hitting her. James claimed that after the accident, Robin became hysterical, and he restrained her with handcuffs not to harm her, but to secure her to the steering wheel of his truck while he sought help. He insisted his actions were driven by genuine concern for Robin's well-being. James Worley was arrested in 1989 for trying to abduct Robin. He was found guilty of abduction and sentenced to 6 to 10 years in the state prison in Mansfield, Ohio. Due to good behavior, he was released 3 years later. When Robin found out that James was released, she was terrified. The fear of James potentially striking again weighed heavily on her mind. With information about James Worley's criminal history in hand, the police obtained a search warrant and went to his home. When they arrived, they started searching the house, which James shared with his mother. At first, everything seemed normal. Next, they turned their attention to the large backyard, methodically searching the outdoor area. The officers then discovered a barn located in the corner of the yard, which sparked their curiosity. They approached the structure cautiously. Inside the barn, the police found stacks of hay bales. They searched the barn carefully, looking for any evidence that might connect James to Cece's disappearance. The detectives examined every nook and cranny, checking each bale of hay for hidden items or clues. As they removed the bales of hay from James Worley's barn, the detectives noticed a small green crate in the corner. They approached it cautiously and opened it, finding bags of underwear, stockings, and tube tops. Each item was neatly labeled and sealed in a plastic Ziploc bag. As the detectives searched through the items, they were shocked to see a pair of purple panties with what looked like bloodstains. This discovery filled them with a sense of dread, and they wondered what other disturbing things they might find in their search of James Worley's barn. The detectives quickly spotted a piece of plywood on the ground and recognized its potential importance. They carefully lifted the plywood, exposing a small freezer buried in the barn. When they opened the freezer, they were met with a strong, unpleasant smell, similar to bleach, which heightened their suspicions. As they continued their investigation, they found other disturbing objects hidden behind hay bales, including a stained air mattress that hinted at a dark history. The presence of zip ties, duct tape, handcuffs, and keys added to their concerns, as these items are commonly used in abductions and other criminal activities. The detectives decided to send all the items taken from the property for DNA testing. Worley attempted to explain the items as part of a porn business he claimed to be planning, but the evidence against him was too strong to ignore. The combination of the disturbing discoveries at the crime scene and the incriminating items led to James's arrest for Sierra's murder. Sierra's family was stunned to learn that her abductor was someone who lived far away from her home. This news sparked a million questions in her mind, with the most pressing one being where she was. The detectives launched a thorough investigation of James's property, meticulously searching every inch of it and leaving no stone unturned. They brought in cadaver dogs to help detect any potential remains. The detectives focused on a pond on the property, recognizing its potential significance. They carefully drained it to uncover any evidence hidden beneath the water's surface. They also inspected the insulation in the front of the attic. As the investigation progressed, they extended their search to the neighboring properties, considering the possibility that evidence might have been dispersed beyond James's property. They pursued leads in all directions, diligence and thoroughness guiding their efforts. A farmer was walking through his vast field when he received a call. As he walked, he noticed a peculiar area of corn that was matted down and decided to take a closer look. When he approached the spot, he saw a nearby mound of dirt, which immediately made him think it could be a grave. This worried him even more because of the recent search for Sierra. With this on his mind, he quickly called the police, telling them about his suspicions and giving them the exact location. Responding promptly to the farmer's distress call, the police arrived at the scene. They noticed a fresh pile of dirt, which fueled their suspicion that it could be a grave. Taking the situation seriously, they began processing the area carefully to avoid disturbing any potential evidence. The officers examined every inch of the scene, hoping to find clues about Sierra's whereabouts. However, despite their thorough efforts, their search yielded no results. The detectives then searched the adjoining farms for Sierra, using drones and helicopters to cover a larger area and increase their chances of locating her. During their search, they found another mound of dirt with freshly matted corn. Their trained dogs detected the scent of decomposition, suggesting a potential crime scene. As the crime scene investigators dug, they made a grim discovery. They found human remains. Based on the evidence, it was believed to be Sierra's body. Tragically, her hands were bound behind her back, and her feet were tied to the handcuffs. Further examination revealed that an object was lodged in her mouth, restricting her airway, which ultimately led to her death. Later that night, the Sierra family received a devastating call they had been fearing. The police had found Sierra's lifeless body. The news was met with an overwhelming outpouring of grief as the entire family broke down in tears. The sorrow felt by each family member was palpable, and the weight of the moment was crushing. A month after Sierra's tragic abduction and murder, James Worley was charged with 19 counts, including kidnapping and aggravated murder. 2 years later, Worley's trial began. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. Over 8 intense days, the prosecution presented a gripping story that captivated the jury and spectators alike. After deliberating for 6 hours, the jury found Worley guilty on all counts related to Sierra's murder. The severity of the crime led to Worley being sentenced to death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Anna Walsh. Anna Luic, later known as Anna O'Neill, was born on April 18, 1983 in Belgrade, Serbia. She grew up in a cultured family with her younger sister. At the 5th Belgrade Gymnasium, Anna excelled as a standout student. She then attended Belgrade Research University, the most historic and expansive university in Serbia. Anna pursued foreign languages, earning a master's degree in French language and literature at 22. With her diploma, Anna sought a new chapter in the United States, fully supported by her family. In 2005, she settled in the US, aiming to further her education in hospitality management. She took administrative roles at prestigious hotels, including the Inn at Little Washington in Virginia. Anna's warm approach, sense of duty, and conflict resolution skills quickly earned her respect from peers and supervisors. Multilingual and charming, she formed connections easily. Beloved by colleagues and friends, Anna seized every chance to shine. She became a US citizen, retaining her Serbian nationality, and enjoyed a high income, investing in property and a car. Her travels further broadened her horizons, and her career flourished, leading to a promotion to senior manager. Anna's captivating qualities, including her intelligence, beauty, slender physique, and radiant smile, drew in numerous admirers. While working at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts, she met and fell in love with Marcus O'Neill, the hotel's head chef. Their romance ultimately led to their marriage in 2009, at which point Anna took her husband's last name. Born in July 1975 in Boston, Massachusetts, Brian Paul Walsh came from a prominent, wealthy, and respected family. As a young man, he would frequently borrow money from friends, only to fail to repay them. During his college years, he would invite friends to dine at upscale restaurants, then use various tactics to manipulate others into covering his share of the bill. Brian was estranged from his father, Dr. Thomas Walsh, for many years until the elder's death in 2018. The estrangement dated back to when Brian fraudulently withdrew nearly $1 million from his father's personal account and disappeared with the money. Despite this, Dr. Walsh chose not to report the incident to the police and instead tried to persuade Brian to return the money voluntarily. However, when Brian refused, Dr. Walsh cut off all communication with him. By the time of the theft, Brian's parents had already divorced, and his father had started a new family. In response to Brian's actions, Dr. Walsh decided to remove him from his life and will. After Dr. Walsh's passing, Brian reappeared and filed a lawsuit claiming that the will was forged by the doctor's widow and younger children to deny him his rightful inheritance. However, Brian was unable to prove his claims and received no part of the estate. Those who knew Brian described him as greedy, malevolent, and cruel, with a tendency towards violence and a lack of emotional control. He often relied on force to achieve his goals and became dangerous during bouts of anger. In the late 2000s, Brian received treatment in a psychiatric clinic to address his rage issues, during which he was officially diagnosed with sociopathy. Brian and Anna first met in 2014 when Anna was working as a senior reservation manager at the Wheatley Hotel in Massachusetts. At the time, she was married to Marcus O'Neill, who was also employed at the hotel. Brian, who was a guest at the hotel, was immediately drawn to Anna's charm. Despite knowing she was already married, Brian continued to show her increasing attention, which eventually became insistent. Used to getting his way, Brian persisted in pursuing Anna, even after she rejected him. He managed to get her phone number and home address where she lived with her husband and began to harass them relentlessly. In 2015, the Anna were forced to seek police protection from Brian's constant harassment, which continued day and night. Brian would show up at Anna's workplace, call her at home, and send her messages, demanding she leave her husband for him. The situation took a dark turn when Brian threatened to harm Anna and her husband if she didn't comply with his demands. What triggered Anna's change of heart remains unclear, but a year after seeking police protection, she unexpectedly divorced her husband. Months later, Brian became her second husband. They settled into a luxurious home in Quezon, Massachusetts, an upscale neighborhood about 20 miles southeast of Boston. They had 3 sons in quick succession, with the boys being 2, 4, and 6 years old at the time of Anna's disappearance. Despite having a demanding job, Anna successfully balanced her career with motherhood, never taking maternity leave. She became the regional general manager at Tishman Speyer, a real estate company, earning a high salary and becoming the primary breadwinner for the family. Due to her frequent business trips to Washington, D.C., she also bought a second home in her name, where she stayed during these trips. To help take care of their children during her absences, Anna relied on visiting nannies. Meanwhile, Brian was unemployed while his wife was building their family and advancing her career. He had spent most of the $1 million he had taken from his father, and all of Anna's acquisitions were registered in her name. As a result, Brian was actively searching for ways to generate effortless income. Before marrying Anna, Brian had formed a connection with a wealthy individual in South Korea, whose family possessed an impressive art collection. After returning to the U.S., Brian maintained this connection and was unexpectedly asked by his friend to assist in selling several Andy Warhol paintings. Instead of just earning a commission, Brian decided to profit from the transaction. He gained access to a series of abstract Warhol paintings titled Shadow and appraised each one, obtaining authenticity certificates. Then, he created copies of both the paintings and documents. Brian found artists who could create precise replicas, convincing them he needed backups, since each original was worth around $250,000. For several years, he successfully sold fake paintings as originals to collectors worldwide. However, one buyer, an expert in Andy Warhol's work, quickly identified a forgery and sued Brian. The FBI investigated, and in April 2021, Brian pleaded guilty to selling counterfeit art. He was placed under house arrest after his lawyer negotiated a deal, requiring him to return the proceeds to the buyers and avoid prison time. Brian was under house arrest, but he was allowed to leave his house twice a day for specific activities. He could drive his children to and from school, and had a 2.5-hour window in the morning to visit a limited list of approved places in his neighborhood, such as stores, pharmacies, and dry cleaners, to buy essential items. On December 31, 2022, Mrs. Anna Walsh mysteriously disappeared. The Walsh family had planned to celebrate New Year's Eve together at home, just the 5 of them, Anna, Brian, and their 3 young sons. After the boys went to bed early, Anna and Brian stayed at the dinner table. That evening, Anna posted a message on social media, wishing everyone a happy new year, and hinting that the past year had been tough, but she and Brian were still together. Anna was scheduled to fly to Washington, D.C. for work on January 3rd, but when she failed to show up, her employer Tishman Speyer reported her missing to the police on January 4th. Brian also reported her missing, worried that he hadn't been able to contact her for days. According to Brian, he last saw Anna on January 1st when she woke him up early in the morning, claiming she had to go to work due to some issues and her boss had asked her to come in earlier than planned. He believed she then headed to the airport with only a few belongings. However, several inconsistencies in the case soon arose. For instance, Anna had not bought, changed, or reserved a flight ticket for January 1st, and she had not canceled her scheduled flight for January 3rd. Additionally, She was not seen at the airport on either January 1st or 3rd. Furthermore, it was unclear how she left the house since her personal car was still in the garage and she had not called a taxi. Brian's suggestion that she might have hitchhiked was not convincing. Brian's statements and behavior sparked numerous questions. His explanations were contradictory, and he didn't appear particularly concerned about the unfolding events. Despite being unable to contact the mother of his children for over 3 days, he only reported her missing on the 4th day, and only after her workplace called. From the start, Mr. Walsh was considered a prime suspect, yet law enforcement didn't have enough evidence to arrest him or obtain a warrant to search their family home. They conducted a limited inspection with the homeowner's permission, but it didn't yield any results. Brian claimed to have led a normal life during those 3 days, visiting usual stores and doing household chores. However, verifying his claims was challenging, as he often left the house without his phone, which he alleged was frequently taken by his older children to play games without his permission. On January 5th, the police issued a public appeal on TV, showing a photo of Anna and asking anyone who knew her whereabouts or what had happened to her to contact the authorities immediately. However, no one came forward with any information. The last time Anna had been in touch with anyone was on December 31st, when she made phone calls to her mother and sister. Her husband was the last person known to have seen her. Surveillance cameras in the neighborhood did not capture any footage of Anna on the morning of January 1st, making it seem as though she had never left her home. In contrast, her husband was recorded leaving and returning to their home several times, but it was impossible to determine where he had gone. His claim of visiting a supermarket was proven to be false, as his vehicle was not seen on any routes to the store, and he was not spotted inside. It wasn't until January 8th that Brian was arrested for making false statements and was taken in for questioning at the police station. His home was finally searched, and it was discovered that on January 1st, he had visited a hardware store in a different area, which was not on the list of approved locations he was allowed to visit while under house arrest. At the hardware store, Brian spent nearly $500 on a large quantity of cleaning supplies, including plastic sheeting, duct tape, a mop and bucket, and utility rags. He paid in cash, likely hoping to keep his visit secret. During a search of the Walsh family home, disturbing discoveries were made. Although the house appeared normal at first, with no signs of struggle or bloodstains, the basement told a different story. Law enforcement officers found smeared bloodstains everywhere, along with a bloodied knife and saw wrapped in towels, hidden among the clutter. Brian had previously admitted to visiting his mother's home on January 3rd, claiming he needed to help her with household tasks due to her poor health. However, after the grim discoveries in the basement, police suspected that Walsh may have disposed of evidence or parts of his deceased wife's body on his way there. They inspected trash bins in the area where the couple lived, as well as along the road to his mother's house, and found a kitchen hatchet with dried blood and several blood-stained towels, similar to those found in the Walsh basement. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood in the basement on the towels, knife, hatchet, and saw belonged to Anna, confirming her death. The seized laptop and tablet revealed a disturbing search history. Weeks prior to his wife's disappearance, Brian had been actively searching online for information on the most favorable states for divorce in terms of property division. He also looked into whether he could claim the second home in Washington, D.C., which was owned by Anna and registered solely in her name, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. One of the earliest searches, made around 4 a.m. on January 1st, was about how long it takes for a body to decompose. This was followed by nearly 24 searches on how to dispose of a body, including how to clean up blood traces, how to dismember a body, and whether a body could be identified if the teeth were removed. He also searched for information on how long DNA traces last and whether a person could be charged with a crime if the body was never found. All of these searches were conducted on his young child's tablet. By January 3rd, Brian's searches had shifted to inheritance, as he looked into how and when someone can inherit the property of a person who has disappeared. This suggests that he was confident he would avoid punishment and was preparing to claim the inheritance. On January 18th, Brian was officially accused of murdering his wife, even though her body or remains had not been discovered. Prosecutors allege that on New Year's Day, Brian intentionally or accidentally killed his wife, then decided to get rid of her body by dismembering it in their home's basement. He allegedly put the body parts in plastic bags and threw them away in trash cans located in different areas of the city. The area surrounding the Walsh home, as well as nearby empty lands, wooded areas, and bodies of water, were extensively searched for evidence, but nothing was found. The defendant, Brian Walsh, has pleaded not guilty and is refusing to reveal what happened to Anna's body. Recently, Anna had been unhappy and was considering divorcing her husband, which she mentioned several times during phone calls with her mother and sister the day before she vanished. However, her mother did not take Anna's threats seriously and decided to put off her visit. The trial is ongoing, and Brian is being held at the Norfolk Correctional Facility as he awaits his next court date. Anna's mother is following the investigation from her home in Serbia and has not traveled to the United States. The Serbian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has contacted the New York consulate, which is in touch with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office to ensure Anna's mother is kept informed about the investigation and hearings. Brian and Anna's 3 sons are now in state custody because none of Brian's family members are willing to care for them. They cite Anna's mother's age and poor health, and her sister, who lives in Canada, has also declined to take in her nephews. The only person willing to take the boys in is Pamela Bond, a close friend of Anna's, who prefers this to them being separated and placed in different foster homes. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sydney Loof. Sydney Irene Loof was born on August 21, 1993 in Broken Bow, Nebraska, to George and Susan Loof. She spent her childhood in Arcadia with her parents until 2000, when the family moved to Ney, where her mother worked as a special education teacher and her father was the school principal. Growing up, Sydney was an energetic and outdoor-oriented girl who loved nature. Her father, George, often took her fishing during her school years. She was also involved in sports, playing basketball and golf, where she showed promise. However, she developed scoliosis, which forced her to give up many of her favorite activities and ended her sports career. After graduating from high school in 2011, Sydney found employment at a local Menards store that specialized in home improvement products. Despite moving from Norfolk to Lincoln for work, Sydney remained close to her family, who made an effort to stay in touch almost daily and regularly met for dinner. Although she lived independently, Sydney frequently returned to her parents' house. Sydney had been battling depression, feeling that the medications she was on were actually making her condition worse. Her mom, Susie, was deeply concerned and urged her to see a new doctor, who prescribed different medications. During phone calls with her mom, Sydney's voice sounded increasingly optimistic as she reported that her mental state was improving. She was attempting to make positive changes in her life, including searching for a new job, as working in a store didn't fulfill her ambitions. However, she was still uncertain about her career goals, which contributed to her feelings of depression. By November 2017, Sydney's mental health had taken a turn for the worse, leading her to take antidepressants and occasionally smoke marijuana. Despite her family and friends offering support, she yearned for romance and love. As a young modern woman with an interest in the same gender, Sydney sometimes turned to social media to find potential dates. To expand her social circle and find a friend, she used Tinder, a popular dating app. In November 2017, Sydney met a man named Aubrey online, and they started exchanging messages. They quickly discovered they had a lot in common, including a love for gambling, hiking, and good food. After just 100 messages, they decided to meet in person on November 14th. Sydney visited Aubrey at his home in Wilbur, and their first meeting went really well. They hit it off and agreed to meet again the following day at Aubrey's house. Before their second meeting, Sydney worked her shift at the store, went home, and got ready. She even took a photo of herself and posted it on Tinder with the caption, "Ready for my date." When Aubrey arrived, they drove off together. The next day, however, Sydney failed to show up for work, which was unusual for the normally reliable Sydney. Despite her high spirits in the days leading up to her disappearance, her family was worried when her coworkers informed them that she hadn't shown up. Sydney's mother, Susie, revealed that her daughter had been struggling with anxiety and depression in the days leading up to her disappearance. Sydney had discussed her deteriorating mental health with her family, who advised her to see a doctor again to take antidepressants. That was the last time Sydney's family saw her. When Sydney's parents went to her apartment, they were extremely surprised to find that she had left her favorite cat, Mimsy, without food or water. This was extremely unlike the caring pet owner they knew Sydney to be. Concerned, they reported Sydney missing to the police. During a welfare check of Sydney's home, the police found the apartment locked and saw nothing out of the ordinary. However, the family remained adamant that something was wrong, and the police took their concerns seriously. On November 16, 2017, Sydney Loof was reported missing after failing to arrive at her workplace, the Menards store showroom on 27th Street in Cornhusker Highway. Sydney had a spinal condition that affected her gait, making her stand out in a crowd. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a white Columbia brand jacket and a cream-colored shirt. According to her parents, Sydney told her friend on Snapchat on Wednesday morning that she had gone on a date with a man she met online the previous night and planned to meet up with her again that evening. Her car was found in Northeast Lincoln, and police conducted interviews, searching for any leads that could help locate Sydney. A massive search effort was launched to find Sydney, featuring highway billboards with her photo and a televised manhunt. Susie remained adamant that something had happened to her daughter after her date. To support her claim, she shared a screenshot of a Snapchat post by Sydney, captioned, "Ready for my date." Sydney's friends confirmed that she was planning to meet a woman named Aubrey, whom she met on Tinder. During the investigation, police examined Sydney's phone records and surveillance footage from her workplace, which led them to identify a key person of interest. They traced Sydney's last phone signal to a cell tower in the Wilbur neighborhood, likely close to Aubrey's residence, although they had no information about Aubrey's identity at the time. Authorities started looking for a man named Aubrey, who was the last person to see Sydney before she went missing. The problem was that no one knew Aubrey's real identity or if he even existed. Sydney's friend Brooklyn took matters into her own hands and decided to track down Aubrey using Tinder. She downloaded the app, found Aubrey's profile, and exchanged phone numbers with him. This allowed the police to finally learn Aubrey's real name, which was Bailey Boswell, a 26-year-old woman. Further investigation revealed that Bailey lived in an apartment near the cell tower where Sydney's phone was last connected. Bailey shared this apartment with her partner, 52-year-old Aubrey Trail. Bailey Boswell, from a normal and wholesome family in Lyons, Iowa, grew up as a friendly and successful student who excelled in basketball and running. However, following her father's death, her life took a downward turn. She started keeping bad company and got involved with alcohol and illicit drugs. On a dating website, Bailey met Aubrey Trail, a man with a history of fraud, issuing fraudulent checks and theft. Aubrey had created a cult where he referred to himself as the Vampire Daddy and paid women $200 weekly to follow his unusual rules. At the time of Sydney's disappearance, Aubrey and Bailey faced a court order to pay over $40,000 in fraud reparations and had multiple misdemeanors against them. On November 19, 2017, they went into hiding. When police searched their apartment, they found that some walls had been scrubbed with bleach, which a neighbor confirmed. After a few days, the police located Aubrey and Bailey at a hotel in Branson, Missouri, and took them into custody a few weeks after Sydney's disappearance was reported. A thorough examination of phone records and Bailey's location data led the police to the gruesome discovery of Sydney's remains. Her body had been dismembered, with 13 parts found in black plastic bags and ditches in Clay County. Tragically, some of her organs, including her heart, were missing. Bailey and Aubrey were charged with first-degree murder, improperly disposing of human remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Bailey pleaded not guilty to all 3 charges. Aubrey, on the other hand, pleaded not guilty to felony murder and conspiracy, but guilty to improperly disposing of human remains. However, Aubrey's various statements were inconsistent, and he often appeared confused, changing his account of events and introducing new characters. He made bizarre claims, including that he was a vampire who could fly, and spoke about witchcraft. Aubrey claimed to be a cult leader and vampire, telling authorities he had witches in the cult who needed to kill another woman to gain powers. In one of his early court hearings, Aubrey admitted to killing Sydney Loof, but said it was an accident. He claimed to have paid Sydney $5,000 to participate in a threesome with 2 other women, which Sydney had agreed to. However, during the act, he strangled her with a cord by mistake. Aubrey also confessed to cutting Sydney's body into pieces, a ritual according to his beliefs, to release her soul to the gods in a sacred place. He believed this would help her reincarnate faster. However, the prosecution presented evidence contradicting Aubrey's story. Surveillance footage from November 14th showed Aubrey and Bailey checking into a Lincoln hotel near Sydney's home. The following day, they visited a home improvement store, buying a hacksaw, bleach, a folding saw, a stationary knife, and the bags used to store Sydney's remains. Furthermore, a surveillance camera caught Sydney encountering Aubrey at the Menards store on November 15th, unaware of the danger she was in. On June 11, 2018, the first court hearing took place regarding the murder and improper burial of Sydney Loof. Although separate trials were ordered for Bailey and Aubrey, the charges against them were essentially the same. The trials were held in Lexington because the defense attorneys successfully argued that a fair trial would be impossible in Wilbur due to the extensive publicity surrounding the case. The prosecution's case rested on the argument that Sydney's death was a premeditated murder, as evidenced by the fact that she was strangled and that the crime was carefully planned and executed. The jury listened to 3 other women who had previously dated Aubrey and Bailey, all of whom they met through Tinder. Each of these women had been intimate with Bailey and had also been involved with Aubrey. One of them shared that she had even gone on a trip with them after they met, during which Aubrey gave her $200 a week and invited her to join his group, which he called Witches, telling her that she would have to torture and kill someone to become a member. Another woman testified that Bailey had discussed breaking her fingers and dissecting a body in detail, revealing her fascination with torture. The prosecution pieced together the events of the fateful evening of November 15, 2017. Sydney had arranged to meet a woman she had known for a couple of days, with whom she had been chatting on Tinder. Bailey picked Sydney up from her apartment, and they drove around in his car. The car eventually stopped at Bailey's house, where Sydney was coaxed into the apartment. Once inside, Bailey and Aubrey attacked her, strangling her with an extension cord on the living room floor. Afterwards, Bailey and Aubrey meticulously cleaned the apartment, which the prosecution argued was a premeditated act. The next day, November 16th, they dismembered Sydney's body and dumped her remains in Clay County. The court heard testimony from Jennifer, the landlord, who stayed on November 16th She drove into the garage and immediately noticed a strong chlorine smell that intensified when she entered the house. The medical examiner testified that Sydney's death was ruled a homicide by asphyxiation. Toxicology reports showed that Sydney had antidepressants in her system at the time of death. In addition to the missing organs, the upper left arm, from just above the elbow to below the shoulder, was also found to be missing from Sydney's body. The prosecutors sought the death penalty for both defendants, and if the sentence was deemed unjust, the case would be retried. However, Aubrey denied any involvement in the occult and pleaded guilty only to improperly burying Sydney's remains. During his trial, Aubrey shouted that Bailey had no involvement in Sydney's death, claiming Bailey's innocence. In a dramatic turn, Aubrey then slashed his throat 3 times with a razor blade but survived and was detained until he made a full recovery. Aubrey testified he lied about Sydney Loof's death, admitting he met her in 2017 and paid her for illegal activities. He claimed Sydney died accidentally during an intimate act with an extension cord in November 2017. Aubrey confessed to dismembering and dumping her body, but maintained it was an accident, and he didn't seek help because he thought no one would believe him. Aubrey confessed to getting rid of Sydney's body, claiming it was an accident from an extension cord during intimate act. Bailey denied involvement, with her lawyers saying she was also a victim of Aubrey's manipulation. However, phone records and location data proved Bailey's involvement, tracking her near where Sydney's body parts were found. The court learned that Bailey initiated contact with Sydney and arranged a meeting. Bailey drove to Sydney's duplex on the evening of November 15th to pick her up. The prosecution claimed that Bailey took pleasure in discussing cruel acts and enjoyed talking about torture with Aubrey. Evidence presented in court revealed a planned crime on the day Sydney was killed. Bailey and Aubrey went to Home Depot around noon that day, where they bought tools, including a hacksaw, scissors, and a box cutter, as part of their plan. Bailey sent Sydney a text message inquiring about her day, and phone records and surveillance footage show that she sent the message from the Menards parking lot, where Aubrey was also present. Sydney, who worked at Menards, seemed unaware of Bailey's presence. A few hours later, Bailey sent Sydney another message on Tinder, stating that she was at Sydney's apartment and would pick her up soon. However, phone records indicate that instead of going on a date as Sydney believed, Bailey and Aubrey went to the apartment where they lived. Bailey's attorney, Todd Lancaster, argued that the evidence only showed that Bailey was guilty of aiding and abetting the improper disposal of Sydney's body by buying bleach in garbage bags. On November 8, 2021, Bailey Boswell received a life sentence. The Loof family had waited 3 long years, grieving and yearning for their Sydney, anticipating a verdict that would bring them solace. Prior to this, on July 11, 2019, a jury took less than 3 hours to convict Aubrey Trail of premeditated conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and improper burial of human remains. A 3-judge panel described his crime as cold and calculated. In the trial's second phase, determining whether he should face execution, county prosecutors secured the death penalty for Aubrey Trail, fulfilling their promise. Consequently, on June 9, 2021, Aubrey Trail was put to death by lethal injection. Aubrey Trail, the con artist accused of brutally murdering Nebraska woman Sydney Loof, allegedly deceived his cult followers by claiming to be a flying mind-reading vampire with a coven of 12 witches. He claimed these witches gained their powers by killing people. Fortunately, in this real-life story, justice prevailed, and through the trial, the monster faced the end of his trail. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Valeria Vivano. Valeria Fernandez Vivano was born on May 29, 1996 in Laguna, a small commune near Santiago, Chile's capital city. She was the youngest of 3 children born to Miguel and Jacqueline Vivano. Valeria grew up with her older biological siblings, Michelangelo and Daniela. Her father worked for a transportation company, while her mother was a dedicated homemaker who focused on raising their children and creating a warm home environment. When Valeria started school, her parents decided to separate, which was a huge shock to her. Although they continued to communicate after the divorce, and her father remained involved in their lives, providing financial support, Valeria harbored resentment towards him. They would occasionally argue, sometimes not speaking for months, but they always reconciled. After the divorce, Miguel Vivano remarried and had 2 more children, becoming Valeria's half-siblings. Despite this, Valeria, Daniela, and Michelangelo maintained warm relationships with them. Jacqueline, on the other hand, never remarried, focusing on raising her children and later caring for her grandchildren from her older children. Valeria showed a strong-willed character, determination, and perseverance from a young age. She excelled academically, participated in sports, and demonstrated courage and a strong sense of justice, often putting others' needs before her own. Valeria's desire to help those around her, protect the vulnerable, and fight for justice likely inspired her to pursue a career in law enforcement. After graduating from high school, Valeria enrolled in the police academy in Santiago, where she graduated with honors in 2016 at the age of 20. The following year, she joined the Chilean police force and began working in the capital's serious crimes unit. From the start of her career, Valeria demonstrated herself to be a dedicated and passionate law enforcement officer, driven by a strong sense of justice. She was deeply committed to her job, performing her duties with diligence and always ready to respond to any situation at a moment's notice. Whether it meant leaving in the middle of the night to investigate a crime scene, pursuing suspects at personal risk, or providing emotional support to those who had lost loved ones, Valeria was always willing to go the extra mile. Her colleagues praised her as kind, cheerful, and friendly, yet she remained a consummate professional and trustworthy partner. Over nearly 5.5 years of service, Valeria received numerous accolades and awards, rapidly advancing in her career and earning the respect of her peers and the admiration of her superiors. A highlight of her career was representing her department in Spain, where she spent 2 weeks in Madrid on an official visit, an experience that filled her with immense pride. By 2020, she had risen to the rank of assistant inspector. A 21-year-old rookie cop, Lionel Alejandro Contreras Canales, joined the precinct where Valeria worked, fresh from the police academy. Valeria took him under her wing, becoming his mentor in his first job. A few months into their partnership, they got along fairly well. Not much is known about Lionel's upbringing, but it's believed he came from a wealthy and influential family with a high-ranking official as an uncle, which gave him a life of comfort and luxury. As a result, Lionel was self-absorbed, expecting everything to go his way. Valeria soon caught Lionel's attention, and he made several attempts to win her over, asking her out on dates, but she rejected him each time. Valeria was dedicated to her job and saw workplace romances as unprofessional. She was also strict with Lionel, viewing him as immature. Although Lionel was only 3 years younger, Valeria found his behavior childish and hoped to help him grow up. On May 29, 2021, Valeria turned 25. She celebrated her birthday at her mother's house, surrounded by many guests, including relatives, friends, and work colleagues. However, Lionel was not invited. Valeria intentionally left him out to avoid any potential awkwardness, as he had recently tried to rekindle their romance. When she talked to him about it, he only reaffirmed his feelings for her, which she wanted to keep private from their colleagues. Valeria looked upset despite the festivities. She was trying to conceal her sadness with a fake smile. The recent quarrel with her father had caused days of silence between them, and she had hoped he would put their differences aside and come to her party, giving them a chance to make up. But all he did was send a congratulatory message without even bothering to phone her. Jacqueline, Valeria's mother, noticed her daughter's distress and knew that the rift with her father was the cause of her sadness. Angry at her ex-husband's actions, she was convinced that Miguel would eventually reach out to Valeria and they would talk things through and reconcile. Tragically, Valeria and her father never got the chance to resolve their issues. 2 weeks later, she lost her life in a fatal shooting while on duty on June 13, 2021. Valeria was participating in street patrols and vehicle checks that night, searching for suspects related to a crime that had occurred the previous day in a suburb of the capital. The police had issued an alert for a white Kia Chato, believed to be driven by a suspected criminal who was likely armed and possibly accompanied by others in the car. Valeria was riding in a patrol car with her partner Lionel, driven by Deputy Commissioner Felipe Gilardo. They spotted the suspect's vehicle and immediately gave chase, without waiting for backup. The officers successfully intercepted and blocked the suspect's escape. Canales and Vivano jumped out of their vehicle, guns drawn, and yelled for the offenders to surrender and exit their car with their hands raised. Just then, a single shot rang out, and in the ensuing chaos, Valeria clutched her side and fell to the asphalt beside the police car. Reinforcements arrived simultaneously, and her colleagues heard the shot and saw that she was wounded, but they couldn't fully comprehend what had happened or who had fired. The criminals took advantage of the momentary confusion, sped away, and escaped the scene. Despite the swift arrival of medics and her colleagues' efforts to stop the bleeding, Valeria's life couldn't be saved. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where top specialists fought to save her life for several hours. Unfortunately, due to severe blood loss and damage to vital organs, Valeria passed away on the operating table, never regaining consciousness. Valeria's family rushed to the hospital after hearing the news, but they were too late. Miguel, her dad, was overwhelmed with grief and regret, haunted by their recent petty argument. His guilt was so intense, it put his own health at risk. Valeria died in the line of duty during an operation to catch dangerous criminals, hailed as a hero for giving her life to ensure others' peace and safety. Local media extensively covered the story, praising her courage and selflessness. The public was shocked and captivated by the arrests, and soon the suspects were identified as 19-year-old Miguel Alejandro Cupin and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was not released due to his age. Both had previous convictions for minor crimes. In response to the arrests, Chile's president, Miguel Juan Sebastián Pinera, issued an official statement promising that those responsible would face the full extent of the law. As the investigation progressed, some facts didn't add up. Valeria's body was returned to her family after the autopsy and buried in a capital city cemetery, with hundreds attending the funeral. Her parents described the experience as a terrible nightmare. Notably, among those who carried Valeria's coffin was her colleague Lionel, who seemed more grief-stricken than anyone else. However, other colleagues reported that there had been recent tension between Valeria and Lionel, to the extent that Valeria didn't even invite him to her birthday celebration. Legal proceedings started right after the funeral against those arrested the next day. Initially, everyone thought the guilty ones were caught and proving it would be easy. But it soon became clear the investigation was flawed, with key details missed and evidence ignored. A month and a half after the officer's death, 2 employees were suspended for their alleged role in the incident. Valeria's parents were called to the prosecutor's office, expecting new evidence. Instead, they were devastated to learn from prosecutor Juan Carlos Carrasco that their daughter died from a bullet fired by her colleague. Subsequent investigations showed that the fatal shot was fired from a service weapon held by one of Valeria's co-workers. A same-day ballistics test confirmed this, but the results were tampered with, and the bullet's characteristics, shape, caliber, and weight were incorrectly recorded in the evidence locker. Furthermore, the bullet had passed through Valeria's body, but it wasn't extracted. Instead, it was reported to have been extracted, and the entry and exit wounds in the forensic reports were switched. The shot was fired into her back, not her abdomen. Furthermore, the detainees who were on trial, claiming to have confessed to their involvement and were on the verge of imprisonment, began filing complaints. They alleged that their confessions were obtained through torture and threats, and the pistol they had with them that evening was not even loaded. Moreover, their involvement in the prior crime that prompted the interception plan that fateful night remained unconfirmed. A surprising twist emerged in the public's perception of Vivano, transforming her from a tragic hero who died in the line of duty to an innocent victim betrayed by her own colleagues. As a result, the main suspect shifted to Felipe Gilardo Ara, who was driving the police car, and Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales, Vivano's partner, who was seated in the back. Both were immediately suspended from duty. On August 5th, it was discovered that the fatal bullet came from a police-issued weapon. A document surfaced showing examination results that implicated Lionel as the prime suspect, as he was the only one with gunshot residue on his hands, a crucial finding that had been mysteriously left out of previous reports. Additionally, several other vital documents, including ballistics examination reports and the pathologist's conclusions, were improperly stored in an archive box that had not been thoroughly reviewed. It remains unclear whether this was an accident, an oversight, or a deliberate attempt to conceal crucial evidence. The police officers involved in the operation to catch the criminals surprisingly became suspects in the murder of their fellow officer. Along with the suspects already arrested, they participated in a reenactment of the events of that night to clarify what had happened. In the reenactment, Philippe, who was driving, explained that he could only see Valeria, who was sitting next to him in the front passenger seat, when she got out of the car. Lionel, who was sitting behind them, also exited the vehicle, but Philippe couldn't see what he was doing. According to Philippe, Valeria took just a few steps before a shot was fired, causing her to fall to the ground. At that point, Lionel rushed to help the injured woman and provide first aid to try to save her life. Lionel gave a different account of what happened, saying that he and his partner Valeria got out of the patrol car at almost the same time, but she rushed forward immediately after the shot was fired. He denied shooting his colleague, Valeria, and claimed that Philippe, the driver, should have seen him trying to help Valeria and confirmed this. According to Lionel, he was the first to assist Valeria and tried to stop her bleeding to prevent her from dying. The investigation managed to reconstruct the events, despite inconsistencies in the witnesses' statements. They found that Canales was behind his partner when the shot was fired, which corresponded with the bullet's trajectory. Furthermore, he was the only one with traces of gunshot residue on his hands. Lionel was arrested as prime suspect after secret reports and test results were released, while other detainees were freed on condition they stay local, lacking evidence to implicate them. But the officers' motives remained unclear. The prevailing theory is that a tragic accident occurred when an inexperienced young officer unintentionally fired his weapon while standing behind his partner. In a state of panic, he attempted to assist her. Later, when submitting his service weapon, he falsely claimed not to have fired it. However, the truth eventually came to light, exposing that influential relatives of the young officer exploited their power, wealth, and connections to conceal the incident, leading to fabricated reports, missing documents, contradictory evidence, and coerced testimony from detained individuals. Despite Canales' arrest, suspicions about Felipe's involvement persisted. Felipe was also armed with the same service weapons, was present at the scene, and could have accidentally fired the fatal shot. Additionally, Felipe had a history of using his weapon unjustifiably during an arrest, although no one was harmed on that occasion. The defense team, hired by Lionel's relatives, presented a theory that Felipe might have accidentally shot his colleague due to the identical service weapons, which could have been mixed up or intentionally swapped. Felipe's own testimony was inconsistent, and he claimed he couldn't accurately describe the events that took place. Despite this, The lack of gunpowder residue on the driver's hands suggested his innocence. Philippe's explanation that the residue came from when he was compressing the victim's wound was not believable, given that Valeria's blood stains remained on his hands. The investigation was widely criticized, and the victim's parents were left feeling desperate, leading to public outrage and a loss of trust in law enforcement. Following further investigation, Lionel remained the sole suspect. Lionel was ultimately found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years in prison. However, in a surprise move, the Supreme Court later overturned the sentence, reducing his imprisonment to just 540 days. Valeria's family is now planning to sue the Chilean state, accusing the judges of corruption. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Belinda Temple. 1986 was the year Belinda started her college education in her hometown. Unlike her twin sister Brenda, who attended Steve Austin University, Belinda stayed close to home. Her decision was largely influenced by her relationship with Marshall Kelmy, who was 3 years her senior. Belinda was deeply infatuated with Marshall, and this relationship began during her high school years. However, Belinda's parents were not in favor of this relationship. They feared that being involved with Marshall would hinder their daughter's opportunities for a prestigious education. They also worried about the potential consequences of an early pregnancy, which might lead to Belinda dropping out of college altogether. The disapproval of Belinda's parents led to numerous arguments at home. Belinda's mother was particularly opposed to the idea of her daughter moving in with Marshall before marriage. She made her stance clear by stating, "He is nobody to you. Once you're married, you can move out, but until then, you have a home here." This remark seemed to only strengthen Belinda's resolve. In a bold move, Belinda and Marshall announced their decision to get married during a family dinner. Despite the tension, they shared their plans, which was met with a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Belinda's mother was visibly upset but seemed resigned to their decision, gritting her teeth and remaining silent for the rest of the evening. In reality, Belinda had made up her mind to marry Marshall as a way to assert her independence and prove to her parents that she was capable of making her own decisions. They didn't have a grand wedding celebration. Belinda wore her sister's white dress, invited a few close friends, and she and Marshall signed the papers. Afterward, they strolled around the city, enjoying champagne and each other's company. The next day, Belinda packed her belongings and moved in with her husband, who was still living with his parents. They hadn't planned to rent a separate place. Getting married didn't change much in their relationship. As mentioned earlier, Belinda's primary reason for marrying was to gain independence and stop her mother's nagging. However, her new life turned out to be quite unpleasant. Less than 6 months later, Marshall started spending less time at home, claiming he was working late. In reality, he was seeing another woman. Belinda discovered this when she noticed her husband acting strangely. One day, she waited until his work hours ended and followed him, which is when the truth came to light. She saw Marshall walking hand in hand with a woman she didn't know, likely a colleague. The deceived wife, Belinda, left her husband, Marshall, after discovering his infidelity. She didn't create a scene, but instead packed her belongings and returned to her mother's house. Marshall tried to win her back, but Belinda was too proud to forgive him. They eventually got a divorce. A few years later, Belinda was pregnant and working part-time at a school. Despite her pregnancy, she was concerned about missing the upcoming basketball competition between schools and not being able to prepare her team properly. Her colleague, Richard Bachman, didn't share her enthusiasm and had often expressed his disinterest in teaching. Belinda couldn't understand why Bachman, a 40-year-old man who seemed uninvested in his job, still held his position. As a diligent teacher, Belinda noticed that one of her students, Riley Jo Sanders, a high school senior, had been absent from class for months. She reached out to her colleagues to determine if the issue was specific to her class or if Sanders was a habitual truant. Her colleagues told her that Sanders came from a troubled home and rarely attended school, implying that his absences were not Belinda's problem. That evening, Belinda decided to take further action. She visited Riley Jo Sanders' mother, who lived nearby, and had a serious conversation with her. Although the talk seemed to have an impact, it didn't quite yield the results Belinda had hoped for. Sanders began attending class and participating on an equal level with his peers. However, during a basketball game, when Belinda called out Sanders for pushing an opponent and exhibiting poor behavior, he responded with insults and threats, warning her to be careful, especially in the evenings. After her breakup with Marshall, Belinda had nothing left for her in her hometown. She decided to follow her sister to Stephen F. Austin State University. It was there that Belinda found her true calling. Alongside her studies, she worked part-time as a basketball coach and had high aspirations. At the same university, Belinda met David Temple. Like her, he was a part-time coach but for soccer, and he also played for the university team as its captain. Soccer had been an integral part of David's life since childhood, and it was clear even then that he was destined to excel. He consistently performed well for his team, earning the respect of all his teachers. Despite his difficult nature, which could lead him to insult or even physically confront others, David's behavior was often overlooked because of his on-field performance. During games, he would become fully engaged and find it difficult to calm down for a long time afterward. However, one of his teammates later revealed that David's aggressive behavior was due to his use of steroids. David's behavior changed significantly when he was with Belinda. He became a caring and chivalrous partner, but with one major caveat: he would become aggressive and confrontational if he perceived anyone as a threat to their relationship. Belinda was well received by David's parents, who admired her love for sports, a common interest she shared with their son. However, Belinda's twin sister and friends were less than thrilled about her relationship with David. They had known Belinda as a strong-willed and independent person, but since being with David, she had become more subdued and focused on pleasing him. Her relationship with her family also suffered, with less frequent phone calls and visits, which naturally caused concern among her loved ones. As graduation approached, David and Belinda adopted a bull terrier named Shaq. After receiving their diplomas, they got married in 1999. January 1999, David and Belinda Temple were expecting their second child. With the due date nearing, doctors predicted Belinda would go into labor within a couple of weeks. As with many pregnant women, Belinda was frequently exhausted, and caring for their son Evan added to her fatigue. One evening, David decided to give his wife a break from household chores and allow her some rest. To minimize distractions, David took Evan for a walk in the park. As they strolled through the fresh air, their hunger grew, so they stopped at a cafe for a snack. After their cafe visit, David and Evan headed home. Upon arrival, David noticed the front door had broken glass. He quickly told Evan, "I'm going to take you to visit Harland for a bit, okay?" Without waiting for Evan's response, David led him to a neighbor's house, where family friends lived. Evan, struggling to keep up, asked, "Why can't we go to Mom's?" David, unsure of how to respond, said, "Mom's in the hospital right now." The neighbor, Quentin Harland, had just opened the door to unexpected visitors when David rushed past him, taking his son into the living room without a word. David then ran towards his own house, leaving Quentin confused. Quentin shouted to his wife to care for the child and followed David. "What's going on?" Quentin asked, but before David could respond, they reached David's house, where Quentin saw the front door was broken. Upon entering, Quentin saw the house was in disarray, with open closets and belongings scattered everywhere. A trail of blood led to the stairs, prompting Quentin to push David aside. Under the stairs, in the dressing room, they found Belinda lying face down with a severe head wound. David, seemingly in shock, didn't react. Instead, he took out his phone and called the police. Police officers quickly arrived at the scene, but they were initially unable to enter the house due to the Temple family's aggressive bull terrier, Shaq, who growled and barked at the unfamiliar men in uniform. One officer drew his gun in response, but David intervened, shouting at them to put their guns away and rushing to restrain the dog in the garage. Upon entering the house, the police assessed the scene and concluded that the perpetrators were likely burglars who had not expected Belinda to be home. Despite her pregnancy, they had shot her to eliminate her as a witness. When police started investigating a crime scene, they were baffled by how the burglar got past the fierce dog, Shaq, that guarded the house. They were also unsure how the perpetrator distracted the dog. Upon closer inspection of the front door, police found broken glass, but its positioning suggested it was broken while the door was already unlocked, which seemed strange. Inside the living room, a box on the nightstand caught their eye, containing jewelry such as earrings, rings, and a gold chain. What puzzled them was why the thief left the jewelry untouched. As police spent more time in the Temple family home, they became increasingly convinced that the whole scene was staged. In their experience, thieves usually take all valuables they can carry, but in this case, nothing appeared to be missing. The presence of the dog continued to raise suspicions, leaving them feeling that something was off. Regarding the murder, Belinda was shot in the back of the head with what was likely a 12-gauge shotgun while kneeling with their back to the killer. However, shotguns are an unusual choice for robbers due to their bulk and difficulty in concealing and transporting. This, combined with the fact that the murder took place at 4 p.m., makes it improbable that a thief would be openly carrying a shotgun at that time of day. When questioned by police about firearms in his home, David mentioned owning a couple of rifles, which he showed to the officers. Notably, the shotgun that could have been used in Belinda's murder was not among the firearms he presented. David went to the police station voluntarily to give a statement and detail the items that had been stolen. Despite appearing nervous, he was cooperative with the police. During this time, his son Evan stayed at Quentin's house, oblivious to what had happened. In 1996, David Temple and Quentin Harland were neighbors and co-workers at a school. They were close friends and often socialized together outside of work, watching sports and hosting barbecues with their families. However, their friendship became strained when Heather Scott, a new teacher, joined the school. Quentin was attracted to Heather, but she rejected his invitation to dinner. What Quentin didn't know was that David had also developed feelings for Heather, and they started a secret relationship. Quentin was angry and hurt when he found out that his married friend, who had a son, was involved with someone else. Despite his feelings, Quentin kept David's secret, even as their co-workers began to notice the romantic connection between David and Heather outside of school. Heather didn't know that David was married, as he didn't wear a wedding ring and kept his personal life private. Belinda had no idea about David's secret life. She once confided in Quentin about her suspicions that David was cheating on her, but Quentin quickly dismissed her concerns. "You're just being paranoid," he told her. "David is a devoted husband and family man. How could you think such a thing?" However, there were signs that something was off. David, who had once been extremely respectful towards Belinda, now frequently insulted her, even in front of others. He would call her fat, despite her only gaining a little weight after childbirth, and would often ask her to leave the room when they had guests, implying that her appearance was embarrassing. Belinda didn't stand up for herself or have a serious conversation with David about his behavior. Instead, she cried at night and felt deeply unhappy as a woman. Meanwhile, David was enjoying his new relationship with Heather. David became increasingly estranged from his family due to a new relationship with a coworker. He put more psychological pressure on his wife, Belinda, and their communication consisted only of insults. Although he never physically harmed her, the verbal abuse continued. That year, Belinda discovered she was pregnant again. The news made her forgive David's past transgressions, and she felt ecstatic. David attempted to appear as a happy father, but it seemed insincere. Sometimes, he would not come home at night, and Belinda was afraid to ask why because she feared his angry outbursts and the potential scandal that could follow. A pregnant Belinda often asked her husband David for help in preparing for the baby's birth, such as running errands, fixing up the nursery, and installing shelves. However, David consistently ignored her requests, leaving Belinda to handle everything on her own, including shopping, painting, and assembling furniture, despite being 8 months pregnant. As Christmas approached, Belinda suggested discussing gift ideas with David, but he proposed skipping gifts that year to save money for the baby. Given the doctor's warning that Belinda might go into premature labor, this seemed like a reasonable decision. However, on Christmas, David didn't even get Belinda a small gift. Instead, he announced that he was leaving to spend the New Year's holidays with friends on a hunting trip. Belinda confided in her sister, who immediately changed her plans to be with Belinda, ensuring she wouldn't feel abandoned, especially since labor could start at any moment. David, during the holidays, spent the time with Heather, who wore a gold necklace given to her by David as a Christmas gift. By 2007, it appeared that David Temple had all but moved on from his wife's murder, as if Belinda had never been a part of his life. The fact that it had been 5 years since the murder and the killer had yet to be caught seemed of little concern to him. He had married Heather in 2001, and together they were raising Evan. The police suspected David of wrongdoing, but they couldn't gather enough evidence to prove anything. While investigating the case files of burglaries in the neighborhood, they discovered that a house on the next street had been burglarized 8 days before the murder at the Temple house. The perpetrator was none other than Riley Joe Sanders, a persistent truant from the school where Belinda taught, who had previously threatened her. He was called in for questioning immediately. Riley had no alibi for the day of the murder, and his father owned a 12-gauge shotgun. However, when the police searched the Sanders house, they did not find the weapon. Realizing the police had reason to detain him, Riley confessed that he was with friends on the day of the murder. He had hidden this information because they were smoking pot in a large group, and he did not want to implicate his friends. As a result, the charge against Riley was dropped. In November 2004, police officers arrived at David's doorstep, handcuffed him, and informed him that he was being held on suspicion of murdering Belinda Temple. David denied the allegations. His trial began in 2007. The investigation revealed that David's motive for the crime was his new relationship with Heather. Colleagues of David testified that during Belinda's pregnancy, he boasted about replacing his fat and pregnant wife with the younger and more attractive Heather. According to the prosecution, David killed Belinda as soon as she returned home from work, as evidenced by her still wearing her work uniform and shoes. They alleged that he then staged a robbery, scattering belongings around the house, before quickly driving to the park with his son to create an alibi. The prosecution also highlighted several suspicious facts, including that nothing was stolen from the house, and a fierce dog in the yard would have prevented any stranger from entering. Furthermore, witnesses reported seeing David's car stopped near a rice paddy, where the murder weapon was likely discarded, with only his son Evan present in the vehicle at the time. However, the shotgun was never found in the area where the crime occurred. Heather testified that before Belinda's murder, her relationship with David was not serious, and she didn't even love him. This statement introduced uncertainty into the jury's decision, as it raised questions about David's motive. Would he really kill his wife over a non-serious relationship, or was Heather lying to protect him? In November 2007, David was sentenced to life in prison. 2 years later, a friend of Riley Sanders came forward to the police to clear David's conscience. According to this friend, Riley had previously confided in him about taking his father's shotgun with the intention of robbing the Temple family home. Riley wanted to teach his teacher, David Temple, a lesson. Riley claimed that he had almost entered the house but was thwarted by a bull terrier that ran out of the garage. He shot at the dog but missed, and fearing the noise would attract neighbors, he quickly ran away. This new testimony was submitted to the court, prompting a review of the case. David was released from prison on bail while the review was underway. Meanwhile, Heather decided she no longer wanted to be married to someone who had spent so much time in jail and whose future was uncertain. She filed for divorce. The jury took a long time to deliberate on David's sentence. The case wasn't revisited until 2023, when David was still awaiting a final decision on his sentence. David was ultimately convicted and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 17 years. Throughout the trial, his son Evan struggled to accept that his father was capable of committing such a heinous crime. Evan continued to support his father until the very end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Her family and early life are not well documented. She spent her childhood in an area called Cuba, where she lived with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. Samadi attended a local school, where she demonstrated a challenging and conflicted personality from an early age. She had difficulty accepting rejection and often used force or deception to get what she wanted. People who knew her recall that Samadi's striking appearance and perfect figure made it easy for her to charm men, but she struggled to maintain relationships. Her beauty and charisma were matched by her greed and vanity, which led her to prioritize material wealth and self-interest above all else. This attitude often discouraged potential partners. Additionally, Samadi became intensely jealous and aggressive after brief relationships. Samadi's doll-like appearance led to her working as a Barbie lookalike at a large Universal bookstore for several years. This earned her a flattering nickname that stuck with her throughout her life. After high school, Samadi had in love with a successful local TV journalist named Osvaldo Fernando Ballery, who was 16 years her senior. Samadi had a long and serious relationship with Osvaldo, with whom she had 2 children, Christopher and Christina. However, due to constant scandals and jealousy, they separated in 2012. After Osvaldo's sudden death, it was discovered that he had not included Samadi in his will. Samadi took matters into her own hands and seized Osvaldo's house, changing the locks to prevent his relatives and heirs from entering. She also took some valuable items that belonged to Osvaldo. His family members were outraged and went to court to accuse Samadi of theft. The police eventually forced Samadi to leave the house, but she was not charged with a crime. Samadi had other relationships, including one with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a daughter named Maria. This relationship was reportedly official, but ended in divorce after a few years. Samadi allegedly gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his knowledge or consent, contradicting claims that she was unmarried at the time. Interestingly, some of her lovers have mysteriously disappeared or died under unclear circumstances, yet this trend went unnoticed for a long time. For instance, one of Samadi's lovers went missing shortly after deciding to end their relationship with the reportedly temperamental and aggressive woman. Despite relative suspicions of her involvement, his disappearance remains unsolved due to lack of concrete evidence. Another former lover, Diaco, met a tragic end after breaking up with Samadi. His murder was initially attributed to a botched robbery, but the perpetrators were never caught. Speculations about Samadi's role in the crime persisted, albeit without solid proof. Her most notable alleged victim was Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native born in December 1992 in San Jose. Gerardo never knew his biological father, who left the family before his birth. His mother, Ana Patricia, later married Hermes Rodriguez, who adopted and raised Gerardo as his own. Gerardo's younger sister, Milena, was born a few years after him. He had a peaceful and carefree childhood and youth. Gerardo attended a regular school, enjoyed motorcycles, and met his true love, Carol, at a young age. By 23, he, Carol, and their 4-year-old daughter Genesis moved into his aunt and uncle's house in San Sebastian, a suburb of the city. Gerardo took a job at a local bakery to support his family. They were happy, especially with the news of a second child on the way. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadi, a 40-year-old woman who regularly visited the bakery. She was attractive, fashionably dressed, and flirtatious. As Samadi aged, she began to have relationships with younger men, likely flattered by their attention. Despite their nearly 20-year age difference, Gerardo became infatuated with Samadi and started secretly meeting with her. She visited the bakery almost daily, catching the attention of other employees. Samadi often brought her 19-year-old daughter, Christina, to the bakery. Initially, Gerardo balanced his family life and secret meetings with Samadi without either woman knowing about the other. However, Gerardo soon let his guard down, boasting to friends and colleagues about his relationship with Samadi, describing her as a terrific mistress who spoiled him with gifts. Rumors about Gerardo's affair soon reached his mother, who attempted to persuade him to end the relationship. The affair was short-lived, ending in October 2015, when Samadi discovered that his mistress, Gerardo, was married with a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Upon learning this, Samadi became enraged. She began harassing Carol, Gerardo's wife, with threatening calls and messages, warning her that Gerardo would be harmed if he didn't return to her exclusively. Gerardo apologized to his wife and reconciled, keeping their family intact. He underestimated Samadi's malice, thinking she would move on and calm down after the breakup. However, Samadi's vindictiveness was more intense than Gerardo anticipated. Shortly after the breakup, Gerardo witnessed a disturbing incident. While walking downtown, Gerardo noticed an older man secretly filming under a young girl's mini-skirt with his phone. Outraged, Gerardo took out his phone to record the scene. He then approached she, told her what was happening, and advised her to report the incident to the police. Gerardo chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to get a clear shot of his face on camera. During the chase, Gerardo asked loudly if the man was enjoying taking photos of his sister's underwear without their consent. The man eventually jumped into a taxi and escaped. That night, Gerardo posted the video on his social media page, and it quickly went viral. Internet users identified the man as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former Ministry of Finance employee. As a result, Gerardo became a national celebrity, giving daily interviews to newspapers and appearing on TV and radio shows. He condemned Delgado's actions and stated that he had no regrets about exposing him. However, Delgado's lawyers began working against Gerardo, accusing him of violating the law by distributing the video. They prepared a lawsuit against him, which left Gerardo surprised and confused. He couldn't understand why he was being judged for exposing his actions, rather than the man being held accountable for his behavior. Gerardo's last interview was on October 7th at a local radio station. Feeling confident and believing he had nothing to hide, he spoke openly. The following day, Gerardo had plans to meet his friend Oswald after work, but he suddenly canceled, citing an unexpected emergency. It was later revealed that he had received a message from Samadi, luring him to the park that evening under the pretext of another interview. Gerardo had no reason to suspect anything was amiss and trusted his former lover. After finishing work, he went to the agreed meeting point, but instead of journalists, two unknown men were waiting. They took his bag, assaulted him, stabbed him multiple times in the chest and stomach, and then fled. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo managed to call a friend and report the incident. The friend immediately alerted the police and medical services. Thanks to the swift response, Gerardo was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save his life for 42 days. He underwent numerous operations, but unfortunately, they were unable to save him. Gerardo passed away on November 19th in the intensive care unit. Initially, multiple theories emerged about the crime. The first theory suggested it was a robbery murder. Gerardo was indeed attacked in a park at night, his bag was stolen, and he was stabbed with a knife, which made it appear to be a typical theft. However, just a few days before, Gerardo had released a sensational video that compromised a well-known former government official, leading to a second theory, that the murder was an act of revenge. The media openly speculated that the former government official may have hired hitmen to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The murder sparked intense debate in the press, with protesters demanding that the perpetrators be caught and brought to justice. The police explored various theories, searching for other potential enemies of Gerardo. For months, the investigation stalled. However, in May 2016, a breakthrough came when footage from a street surveillance camera was discovered. The video showed two men fleeing the scene where Gerardo was fatally attacked. These individuals immediately became the prime suspects, and the police worked to identify and apprehend them. The footage proved to be crucial evidence, and once it was made public, the case started to move forward. It was repeatedly shown on news programs, with viewers asked to take a close look as the individuals could be dangerous. Police created rough sketches of the suspects and described their physical characteristics. One of the suspects soon came forward, hoping that cooperating with the investigation would lead to a reduced sentence. The information provided by the cooperating suspect led investigators to several accomplices and the crime's organizers, Samadi and her daughter Christina. All individuals involved in the crime were eventually taken into custody. Those arrested included Ronald Archie, a cab driver who helped locate the perpetrators, Cesar Chavez, a laborer who acted as an intermediary, and Omar Costa, a young miner who directly participated in the attack and had been tracking the victim on the day of the incident. The investigation revealed the roles and connections of all parties involved through phone records and text messages. Samadi, who had meticulously planned the crime, had enlisted the help of her daughter Christina. Together, they recruited friends Ronald and Cesar to find hitmen to kill Gerardo, staging it to look like a botched robbery in a nighttime park. They were later joined by Omar, who was responsible for ensuring the victim went to the pre-arranged location. Samadi personally chose October 7th as the date for the massacre. On that day, she was in frequent contact with all parties involved, assigning roles and verifying that everyone adhered to the plan. Gerardo was attacked, stabbed multiple times, and robbed of his bag and jacket. These stolen items were later given to the police as evidence. The primary evidence against Samadi was a series of text messages detailing the murder plan and each participant's role. Samadi was so confident she wouldn't get caught that she didn't bother deleting the incriminating messages. Her motive for the crime was jealousy. She didn't want to share her lover with his wife. If she couldn't have him, no one would. She carefully planned the crime, involving her own daughter, who assisted her throughout. Samadi and her daughter were immediately arrested, with no possibility of bail due to the risk of them fleeing the country. Their accomplices were also detained, except for Omar, the youngest participant, who was handed over to juvenile authorities. The investigation spanned a year and a half, concluding in December 2017 when the trial of all parties involved in the criminal conspiracy commenced. It was revealed that Samadhi had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior arrest for forging documents to obtain state benefits, for which she received only a fine. New information also emerged about Miguel Angel Perez, ex-husband of Samadhi. It was discovered that Samadhi had given their child Perez's surname without his consent. She then successfully petitioned the court to order him to pay child support, which he did for over 3 years. However, it was later uncovered that the entire process had been fraudulent. As a result, Samadhi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a substantial fine. During the trial, Gerardo's wife testified that she had been aware of his affair with Samadhi. She stated that Samadhi had threatened Gerardo with death, but he had not taken these threats seriously. The primary motive behind the crime, as previously stated, was Samadhi's jealousy and wounded pride, stemming from her inability to accept that her younger lover had chosen to remain with his wife. Thanks to phone records, it was discovered that the mother and daughter had planned the crime together. Additionally, after the release of the CCTV footage showing the killers, Christine had a nervous breakdown. She called her mother, sobbing, and was close to going to the police to confess. However, her mother calmed her down, assuring her that the investigation would not lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. According to the court's decision, Samadhi was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while Christina, Ronald, and Caesar each received 25-year prison sentences. One of the killers was sent to a juvenile detention center, and the other had not been found at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family was awarded $140,000 in compensation for their loss. After the verdict, the family expressed gratitude to the court for the fair punishment of Gerardo's killers. However, it soon became known that Samadhi and Christina's lawyers had filed an appeal to reduce their sentences. As a result, each participant's sentence was reduced by 5 years. Samadhi is currently serving her 25-year sentence in a Costa Rican women's prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kelly Clayton. Kelly Clayton, also known as Kelly Stage Clayton, resides in Cotton, New York. Kelly Clayton had a promising life ahead of her. In high school, she was an exemplary student, excelling academically and serving as a role model for her peers. Her academic achievements were impressive, and she passed exams with ease. Despite her academic focus, Kelly's appearance was often described as model-like, and she could have pursued a career in modeling if she had chosen to do so. Following high school, Kelly enrolled in a teacher training university to become a chemistry teacher, which brought immense pride to her parents. However, after a few years, Kelly suddenly lost interest in her studies. It is unclear what triggered this change, but she eventually withdrew from the university and informed her parents that she no longer wanted to pursue a teaching career. Kelly felt that she was too young to be confined to a life of grading notebooks and managing classrooms. Instead, she expressed a desire to travel and experience life to the fullest. Her parents were disappointed and upset by her decision, leading to a 6-month estrangement from their daughter. Kelly's life took an unexpected turn when she met Tom Clayton at a party hosted by mutual friends. Tom was immediately smitten with Kelly and began showering her with attention. His athletic physique and attractive appearance made him a standout, which wasn't surprising given his successful hockey career. As a semi-professional player for the Jackal team, Tom was known for his strength and aggression on the ice. However, he realized his hockey career would eventually end due to physical limitations. Tom would have to retire and enjoy the game from the sidelines, either by attending live matches or watching his favorite team on television. They continued with their lives, starting by returning to New York to get married. They then moved to North Carolina and eventually settled in the small town of Cato, which had only a few thousand residents. Tom started a franchise that specialized in rebuilding houses damaged by fires or disasters. He also worked for a friend's company in a related field. Kelly, on the other hand, had dropped out of university and was working as a waitress. Although she changed jobs, she continued to work even after having 2 children. Tom's income was sufficient for the family, and Kelly could have quit her job to care for their daughters, but she chose to continue working to earn extra money. She used this extra income to buy toys and pamper her children. On September 28, 2015, Tom went to play poker with his friends, the Millers, as he usually did. He preferred to attend these gatherings alone, as playing for money required a certain level of skill and experience. Additionally, someone had to stay home with the children, and bringing the whole family would have turned the evening into a noisy and chaotic affair, detracting from the enjoyment of the game. That evening, Tom was on a losing streak, but instead of giving up, he tried to win back his losses. He suggested that anyone who wanted to stay and play until morning was welcome to do so, but no one took him up on the offer, and he ended up going home. At home, a horrific scene unfolded before Tom's eyes. His wife lay in a pool of her own blood, severely beaten and, at first glance, appeared lifeless. Panicked, Tom frantically searched the rooms for his children. Fortunately, they were unharmed but terrified. He quickly scooped up his daughters and rushed to his neighbor Derek's house, desperate to shield them from the gruesome sight of their mother's battered body. From Derek's house, Tom called the police, struggling to process the chaos. The officer who arrived at the scene found Tom kneeling beside his wife's body, attempting to administer CPR. However, the emergency medical technicians soon intervened and pulled Tom away, revealing the devastating truth: Kelly had been deceased for an extended period, and nothing could be done to revive her. The house was in disarray, with blood covering both floors. The bedroom showed signs of an intense struggle between Kelly and her killer, who carried out the brutal act despite the presence of children in the house. It appeared Kelly had been pushed down the stairs, as evidenced by the broken banister, and brutally beaten with a blunt object until the killer was certain she was dead. No signs of knife or gunshot wounds were found. The officer filming the crime scene observed that Tom seemed lost and in shock. He wandered aimlessly, briefly entering the room before exiting, and was unable to provide the officer with basic information, such as the location of the children's room or the emergency exit. However, when asked about his whereabouts during the murder, Tom calmly stated he had spent the evening at a friend's house playing poker. The officer, failing to obtain clear information from Tom, proceeded to question the neighbor and the children. Tom's eldest daughter, Charlie, described the perpetrator as a robber. According to Charlie, she and her sister were drifting off to sleep when they heard their mother scream loudly from the next room. Their mother yelled, "Charlie, run away from here," and then the whole house shook violently. They cautiously left their room and saw the perpetrator leaning over their mother, beating her with what looked like a hammer. They ran back into the nursery, blocked the door with a small nightstand, and hid under the bed. Fortunately, the perpetrator wasn't looking for them, as the nightstand wouldn't have been enough to stop him. When asked to describe the perpetrator, Charlie said he was big, like a bear. He wore blue jeans, a black shirt, and a mask similar to the one her father wears when hunting. Charlie also noted that the perpetrator's eyes looked like her father's, but she didn't remember anything else, as she only caught a brief glimpse before getting scared and running away. Police officers investigating the house couldn't find evidence to support her claim that the perpetrator was a burglar. There were no signs of forced entry at the front or back doors, but the garage gate was open, which could have been an entry point. However, nothing was stolen from the house, including jewelry and cash, and the cabinets were all closed. This was unusual, as burglars typically search every area. officers quickly suspected that he was involved in the murder. They believed he was pretending to be a grieving husband and had actually killed his wife to collect insurance payments. If Kelly's life was insured, Tom could potentially receive up to $1 million. The police just needed to gather evidence to solve the case, especially since the daughter mentioned that the perpetrator's mask and eyes resembled her father's. However, the police couldn't find the hunting mask in the house. After discovering Tom's whereabouts on the night in question, the police interviewed the other poker players. One of Tom's friends was incredulous. "You think Tom is the killer? That's unbelievable. His wife was just murdered, and instead of finding the real culprit, you're focusing on him." Another friend, less emotional, chimed in, "Tom couldn't have done it. He worked 2 jobs non-stop because he loved Kelly and their kids. It's just not possible. Besides, he was with us the entire night, playing poker. Even when everyone else was tired, he wanted to keep playing." Laura, an acquaintance of Tom's, shared her concerns during a break in the game. She recalled that Tom had asked to borrow her phone, claiming he had left his in the car, which was only 10 meters away. Laura found this odd but lent him her phone anyway. Tom stepped outside to make the call, but when Laura checked her phone's call history later, there was no record of the call, suggesting that Tom had deleted it. Laura discussed this incident with her husband, who had been sitting next to Tom at the poker table. He noticed that Tom wasn't paying attention to the game, instead keeping his head down, focusing on something on the table. It turned out that Tom had his phone with him the whole time, which raised more questions. Why did Tom borrow Laura's phone if he had his own? Who was he trying to call, and why couldn't he use his own phone? After Laura's testimony, the police re-questioned Charlie, Tom's daughter, and she reiterated that the robber resembled her father. The next testimony came from the niece of Kelly. She explained that she hadn't told her Aunt Kelly about Tom's true nature because she didn't want to upset Kelly. Aunt Kelly adored Tom. The niece felt her truth wasn't needed, implying that it wouldn't change anything. The niece saw Tom as a person with 2 sides. On the surface, he appeared caring and attentive, often showering Aunt Kelly with attention and gifts, and even helping with childcare, which is more than many fathers do. However, his behavior at work revealed a completely different personality. Recognizing her niece's concerns about being young and alone, Aunt Kelly had set up a job for her with Tom the previous summer. During her employment, the niece handled tasks such as correspondence, registration, and managing documents. At first, her interactions with Tom were strictly professional, mainly because she didn't know him well before working for him. One day, Tom got drunk and came to the office, revealing to the niece that his family life was a facade. He confessed to loving his daughters, but not his wife, Aunt Kelly. He had been unfaithful, having multiple affairs during their marriage, and considered leaving her but stayed due to financial concerns. It was later also confirmed by female participants of a poker game that Tom was indeed unfaithful, having relationships with 2 women present at the game. Additionally, Kelly's 16-year-old niece shared information about Michael Beard, another employee of Tom's firm. Michael was doing repair work on houses after a fire, but there were frequent reports of items going missing from the houses where he worked. Tom initially doubted his customers when they accused Michael Beard of theft during fire restoration jobs. However, as the complaints continued, it became clear that Michael was indeed stealing from clients. Additionally, there were allegations of Michael showing up to work intoxicated. When Tom finally confronted Michael about his behavior, he was understandably upset and disappointed. Despite having every right to be angry, Tom took a surprisingly compassionate approach. Instead of simply firing Michael and cutting ties, Tom actively reached out to other companies and recommended Michael for a job. When none of those opportunities panned out, Tom took it a step further and offered Michael work around his own house, doing odd jobs like cutting the grass, watering plants, and making minor repairs. This decision showed that Tom was willing to give Michael a second chance, even if it meant finding alternative employment for his former employee. The detective brought Michael Beard in for questioning. Michael claimed he only stole because he and his family were in dire need of money. He expressed his gratitude towards Tom, his former employer, who had always defended him. Michael also praised Tom's wife, who had shown kindness by feeding him and giving his children old clothes. However, the investigation took a turn when Michael's wife, Holly, was interrogated. She revealed that Tom had offered Michael a job, which Michael had not mentioned earlier, and promised to pay him $10,000 for it. This new information raised suspicions about Michael's alibi. He was called back to the station and hooked up to a lie detector. The test results indicated that Michael was lying, and he eventually cracked under pressure and began to confess. The investigation was sparked by the death of Kelly, which had shaken Michael. He had even attended church to pray for her soul, showing that he was genuinely distraught by her passing. Despite initial doubts about his involvement, the police had released him after the first round of questioning. However, Holly's testimony changed everything. Tom promised Michael $10,000 to kill his wife, Kelly, and make it look like an accident. The plan was for Michael to sneak into the house while Tom was playing poker, strangle Kelly, and then start a fire to cover up the crime. The house was insured for a large sum of money. Michael found 2 cans of gasoline waiting for him in the garage, which he would use to set the fire. He quietly entered the house while everyone was asleep. He crept upstairs to Kelly's bedroom, but she was either awake or woken by the sound of the door. She saw Michael and began screaming. Kelly's screaming startled Michael, and he tried to strangle her. However, Kelly was stronger than she appeared and fought back. A fierce struggle ensued, moving from the bedroom to the kitchen. Michael was surprised by Kelly's strength, which made the fight much more intense than he had anticipated. Michael was in a state of shock and panic, flailing his arms wildly and grabbing at Kelly's clothes, unable to focus on the fight. In contrast, Kelly was fighting for her life, accurately aiming her blows at Michael's face. If the police had arrived at Michael's location sooner, they would have seen evidence of the beating he had taken. After a prolonged struggle, Michael slammed Kelly's head into the wall with great force, knocking her to the ground. She was unable to get up for some time. Michael then produced a hammer and continued to strike Kelly's head until she showed no signs of life. Consumed by rage and panic, Michael fled the house, forgetting that Tom had instructed him not only to kill Kelly but also to set fire to the house to conceal the crime. Mark Blanford, Michael's accomplice, was just the driver. Knowing Michael from working together and staying with him, Mark had not been surprised when Michael, known for petty theft, had asked him to drive during a break-in. Mark had mentioned that he had initially wanted to decline Michael's request, but that the offer of $500 had been tempting. After some deliberation, Michael had convinced him to participate. Michael's plan had been to rob a businessman, and he had needed Mark's assistance to make a quick getaway before the police arrived. Michael had also promised to help with the car. Mark had eventually agreed, but only on the condition that he could park the car at a safe distance from the house. Michael had accepted this condition. That evening, Mark had waited for Michael in the car in a dark alley, and Michael had come back quickly enough, breathing heavily and telling him to move as fast as possible. Michael hadn't had any bag or sack on him, which hadn't looked much like a robbery. Mark hadn't asked him any questions along the way, simply because he hadn't wanted to know anything. He had just wanted his $500, which he hadn't ended up getting. On the way out, Michael had asked Mark to stop at a bridge over a creek a couple blocks south of there. Mark had stopped there, and Michael had hastily stripped off his outer garments and thrown them off the bridge. Mark had offered to show the place if needed. Indeed, police officers who had arrived on the scene at Mark's behest had found parts of Michael's outer clothing near the creek, as well as the hammer used to kill Kelly. Michael, already in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, began to change his testimony. According to him, he was indeed hired by Tom, indeed for $10,000, but only to commit arson at the house and nothing more. Michael spent a very long time assuring the police of his innocence, and all because he did not know that Mark had shown the place where Michael had thrown out his things, and that his clothes, as well as the murder weapon, had already been submitted for examination. And the experts found both on his clothes and on the hammer the blood of Kelly Clayton. And that was the most direct proof that it was him who killed Kelly, not someone else. Tom denied ordering the massacre of his wife, claiming Michael acted alone. According to Tom, Michael knew Tom had money and was motivated by resentment over losing his job. Tom suggested Michael robbed his house, unaware Kelly was home, resulting in her death. However, Laura, a woman who played poker with Tom, revealed that Tom used her cell phone to make a call. The detective obtained the call records, confirming suspicions. The records showed Tom called Michael on the night of September 28th to 29th. Michael was tried first and maintained he was hired to set fire to the house for insurance purposes. He claimed he didn't kill Kelly and the blood on his clothes came from touching her dead body. He had disposed of his belongings to avoid suspicion of being at the Claytons' house that night. His testimony seemed convincing. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before delivering a guilty verdict on all counts against Michael Beard, who now faced life imprisonment. In contrast, Tom's lawyers managed to gather records of conversations and correspondence between Tom and Michael, but none of these clearly mentioned their nefarious plan. Furthermore, the prosecution's attempts to obtain billing transcripts of Tom's movements yielded no concrete evidence. All the evidence against Tom was circumstantial. However, one key detail caught the attention of investigators. The car in which Mark had given Michael a ride was registered to Tom's company. Moreover, on the day of the incident, Tom had arrived at the office in his personal Toyota but then switched to the company's pickup truck, which was later driven to Michael's house and left there. The truck was returned to the office the day after the tragedy. This suggested that Tom had, in fact, provided Michael with the car that he and Mark used to commit the crime. It was a crucial piece of evidence that the jury testified to during the trial. The 6-day trial concluded with the jury finding Tom guilty of hiring Michael to commit the heinous crime. Michael subsequently appealed, using the testimony of young Charlie, who claimed that the eyes behind the mask belonged to her father. However, the court dismissed the appeal due to the matching description of the clothing found under the bridge. Consequently, Tom Clayton and Michael Beard were sentenced to life in prison. Mark received a 4-year prison sentence for manslaughter. The custody of Tom and Kelly's children was awarded to Kelly's sister, Kim. With time, Charlie has learned to cope with the tragedy. Although she occasionally remembers her mother, she refuses to discuss her father, whom she will never want to see again.